Sound check 1 or 2, GIC, September 11th, sound check 2. Sound check 3, sound check 3.
Good morning. Welcome to the General Issues Committee budget meeting. It is September the 11th, 2025. I'm calling this meeting to order. We have quorum. Joining me in council chambers is Councillor Ted McMeekin, Councillor Mike Spatafora, Councillor Alex Wilson, Councillor Tom Jackson, Councillor Craig Kassar, Councillor Matt Francis, Mayor Andrew Horvath, Councillor Tammy Wang, Councillor Mark Taddison, Councillor Jeff Beattie, Councillor Cameron Kretsch, Councillor Brad Clark. Joining me online, Councillor Esther Pauls and Councillor Narinder Nan. We're on to the agenda. Clerk, my understanding is staff are requesting that item 8.1 be considered prior to items for information, as it is respecting 2025 matters. Items 7.1 and 7.2 are respecting the 2026 budget. So if there's no objection, we'd like to just move that 2025 item up. A mover and a seconder to amend as such, moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Can we approve the agenda then as amended? Hands up or down? Seeing approval, thank you. That is carried. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none. Okay. Before we get into item 8.1, I will use this opportunity as your budget chair to just offer a few table setting remarks. First of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be in this position. And it is a task, while I chair, it is a task of looking at this budget moving forward that we all share. After the consideration of item 8.1, we will be receiving the outlook from GM Zagaric. Staff each year provide this outlook to give us a point-in-time shot of what they know about our finances and our needs. Then the task will shortly become ours and what we want to do with that information and to move forward with the budget once it is presented. I'd just like to take a moment to introduce my tie. My daughter, Frances, who is incredibly awesome, got me this tie. It's a silk tie, secondhand from a thrift store in Hamilton. It really speaks to me because it has all the flags from the provinces across Canada. And included, of course, is the Canadian flag. The reason it speaks to me at this particular time in Canadian history is I think we are all reminded of both the magnificence of this country, the duty that we all have as citizens to uphold its honor and its sovereign integrity, and that all of these provincial flags are about the importance of distinction and difference and place, and honoring those differences and uniting them on points that really matter so that we can stand behind this flag, the Canadian flag. And that's how I see the city, that we are a place of rural, suburban, urban. You as councillors are informed about the uniqueness of your place. And you know that the strength of that place is made much stronger when we recognize those differences and we come together on matters of importance to our entire city to make it stronger and future ready. Having said that, if we can go to now item, beg your pardon, Mayor Horvath.
Thanks, Budget Chair Wilson, and I really just want to start with two things. One is to thank you for taking on this role at what's apparently going to be a pretty fraught time. And I just want to confirm for everybody in the room or anybody who might be new at this council table that in fact this is not a meeting about the mayor's budget. This is not the mayor's budget. We're talking about an outlook of the budget, and we're talking about variance reports, et cetera. So I think it's pretty embarrassing that somebody who's been a councillor for a long time here, or for a couple of years anyways, would think that somehow this is the mayor's budget, which it is not. And so it's unfortunate that we're having audio problems.
Excuse,
Thanks, Councillor Jackson. Appreciate that. But what I would like to say is I think it's inappropriate. I know, I appreciate that. But I also would appreciate if people try to do their best to not obfuscate the facts and to not try to provide disinformation to the public about this process. We have to take it seriously. It's our obligation. It's our responsibility. And as elected people, we have to do that, whether it's hard or not, whether you like it or you don't. It's not appropriate to suggest that we're doing something here that we're not doing. And I would just hope that everybody rises to the occasion this time around. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look at the media today and you'll see it. But I do want to say that it's inappropriate to take people down a path that is not actually factual. Our jobs, everybody has an opinion. I get it. People even make a living out of their opinions. But we also have facts. And I would hope that we stick to the facts, not only today, but throughout the process. And I look forward to the conversation with staff this morning. And I look forward to a process that is actually one that's upfront with the people of this city in terms of how this all rolls. Because otherwise, people will be doing the people of this city a disservice. So thanks, Chair Wilson. I appreciate the opportunity.
thank you. We are on to items for consideration. 8.1 FCS 25043 Tax and Rate Operating Budget Variance Report as of May 31st of this year. I just need a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor so it can be discussed. It's moved by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. It's on the floor. Any discussion on the items, questions, comments, etc.? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you very much. It's been duly moved and seconded, so we'll approve those recommendations or not. Thank you. The vote is up, and it worked extremely well for the first time. Yep. All your votes have been received. It's just tabulating. 15-0, that carries. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Now we can move to items 7.1, followed by 7.2. Where are we here? Okay, 7.1, the 2026 Budget and Financing Plan Outlook. GM Mike Zagaric of Finance and Corporate Services will provide the committee with a presentation respecting the report, the 2026 Financing Plan Outlook. Before Mr. Zagaric begins, I think we need a mover and a seconder to enable GM Zagaric to provide it in its full length. Okay. Okay. So it's moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Beattie, that we ensure that Mr. Zagaric has the time that he needs to provide the presentation. And let's just err on the side of the generosity and go for 25, although I don't think he'll need that much. And please take your time, Mr. Zakaric, to get comfortable there. Okay, do we need a vote on the extension of that? And we need to relay that vote electronically? Just an extension of time.
And it won't show on the screen because the budget's up, but that carried
But
15-0.
It carries
15-0.
for folks who may be listening in, 15-0. GM Zakaric, you're no stranger to this horseshoe or to the numbers, so thank you for the work, and please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm going to start by, and I apologize for this, just stepping back to the variance report and recognizing staff and thanking staff across all the departments. As committee and council are well aware, we've had challenges with respect to our financial reporting because of the cyber incident, and I do want to recognize all of the work across the various departments in compiling that information as it relates to our 2025 variance. You'll know that's our first variance report since our unaudited 2023 year-end variance report. So in keeping with the thank yous I've heard this morning, I'd just like to extend my appreciation to all the staff across the departments. I just want to leave you with this message is, notwithstanding our challenges with respect to systems, there is a relatively high degree of accuracy in that variance report, and that really reflects all of the manual work that staff are doing in compiling that information. So just wanting to leave that message with committee and the community, and again, thank staff as it relates to providing that information that I know is relevant as committee continues to deliberate going forward with respect to our 2026 budgets. And I'm pleased to be before committee today to present the outlook for your consideration. The presentation is designed to provide council with a comprehensive overview of the city's financial position, our fiscal environment, and the projected pressures and opportunities that will influence the upcoming budget deliberations. Staff heard very clearly from council that council wishes to receive information as it relates to the 2025 budget earlier and in a more comprehensive form, and staff have delivered that today in the form of the outlook. Traditionally, the outlook report would have reflected what staff had forecasted in the previous year for the upcoming year. In an effort to satisfy the council's interest to receive more updated information, today's outlook report deviates from that past practice. There is information in today's report that really speaks to what staff are seeing as we go forward to 2026, reflective of more recent trends, including as recently as the summer months. So I want to highlight, is this information is more reflective of where we sit today as we look forward to 2026 versus past outlooks. And there is more information in the report and details for council's consideration. So in keeping with our interest to provide council with the opportunity to understand our fiscal environment and some of the pressures and opportunities. Again, staff set out to do so, and that is what is before you today as it relates to the 2026 budget outlook. And our objective today is to establish a clear starting point for the 2026 budget process. To be clear, this is not a budget, a projected budget. This is really a forecast and outlook for 2026.
Point of order, point of privilege, rather.
Excuse me, Mr. Zakaric, if I could ask you to stop for a moment. I'll recognize Councillor Francis, please.
Yeah, I don't appreciate the mayor having a tantrum in the middle of the meeting when I'm trying to listen to the budget forecast, and I'd appreciate an apology and some professionalism.
Mayor Horvath?
I have no idea what the counselor's talking about, but I think he needs to look in a mirror. Thank you.
Oh, point proven.
Okay. Okay, folks. Sorry, my mic. My job as chair is to ensure a transparent, fair, open process, and I will be chairing accordingly. So let's move forward. Let's get the presentation and let Mr. Zagarek speak to us and through us to the public who are watching, who are very interested. Thank you. So we're just having a little laptop issue. If you're watching from home, your screen hasn't frozen. It's just having challenges advancing the screen presentation.
Chair.
Recognize a member of council who has called for my attention. Member,
Just want to clear up.
Councillor Francis.
It wasn't cleared up. Well, what happened? And I put a point, I asked for a point of privilege, and it wasn't cleared up what happened. I was being chirped by the mayor. I know you heard it, and I asked for an apology that I didn't receive. I was being chirped by the mayor while the microphones were off for us. I couldn't even hear what GM Zagarek was saying. I don't think that is very professional of a mayor to do to one of her councilors, or just simply trying to listen to the budget forecast. It's very unprofessional of the mayor to act that way.
Yes, you're right. I did hear the engagement, and I recognize your point of privilege. You've asked for an apology. I recognize the mayor, and one wasn't forthcoming. My role as chair is to underscore for everyone that people are looking at us to set an example on how we're going to engage with each other and with the public. This is a very serious matter, so I would ask everyone to please focus on the presentation, and let's grant everyone the grace and respect that I know you would seek to enjoy. Thank you. I think we have resolved the issue. Please proceed.
Yeah. Through the Budget Chair, the purpose for today's presentation is to present the budget outlook for the years 2026 through 2028 for both our tax-supported and our water budget. Some of the highlights with respect to the budgets, the outlook serves, as I mentioned previously, as a starting point in the first opportunity for council discussion as staff works to develop the preliminary 2026 tax and rate budgets. The outlook that's before you today provides an overview of the key cost pressures to maintain essential municipal services and improve on the delivery of capital assets within the constraint of a balanced budget. The outlook as well provides an overview of the capital budget outlook, which assumes the continued increased investment towards infrastructure renewal and investing in priority projects. And finally, the outlook provides an overview of the transition to a multi-year reserve strategy leading us to a structured, balanced budget. Some of the external factors that are affecting the 2026 outlook is the geopolitical uncertainty and the introduction of tariffs impacting residents and investor confidence. And we see that in part through some inflationary pressures with respect to our capital program. We see that in part through the investor confidence as it relates to development within the community as examples of how those factors are affecting the municipality and more specifically the financial position of the municipality. We see moderating consumer price index, and while the consumer price index speaks to households, there are some factors within that bundle of goods that is reflecting and moderating some of the pressures for municipalities, including as it relates to fuel, as an example. We see investment in renewed infrastructure in our outlook. With uncertainty surrounding tariffs and the impact tariffs may have with respect to the cost of some of the components to our infrastructure projects, including, for instance, steel and aluminum. And we are presenting through the outlook a significant impact in terms of the reliance on property taxes and water rates as it relates to supporting our forecasted infrastructure replacement program. We're seeing growth in the economy remaining relatively soft. We saw a decline in Q2 with a decline in gross domestic product in Q2 of this year, a decline of about negative 1.6%. And there seems to be some consensus of a potential recession going into 2026. And we see the labor market is weakening with 2 straight months of job losses. Most recently, City of Hamilton, or I apologize, Hamilton's CMA, Census Metropolitan Area, reporting unemployment rate of 7.1% going into the month of July. So these are just examples of some of the challenges that not only the municipality but that our community are facing in the current economic environment, as well as some of the more broader global impacts affecting residents, as well as investors, as well as the municipality. With respect to the 2026 to 2028 budget outlook approach, what is reflected before you are some of the impacts that our collective agreements and our collective agreements requirements are having on our 2026 outlook, and I will unpack that a little further in the budget presentation. Employer and government benefits are another factor that impact our budget outlook. As I've already mentioned, infrastructure renewal and the very accelerated approach the city is taking with respect to infrastructure replacement is a principal theme with respect to our budget, 2026 budget outlooks. You'll see reduced reliance on reserves, and while Council approved a 4-year reserve strategy drawing on reserves to support a number of initiatives, including the Housing Sustainability Investment Roadmap, as well as affordability over this term of Council, you'll see that continued reduced reliance on reserves going into 2026 with a planned weaning off of reserves by 2027. With respect to some of those investments that were funded through reserves that are ongoing investments, you'll see those reflected as pressures going into 2026. As we wean ourselves off of reserves, we have to replace that revenue with a sustainable source of revenue, including property taxes and water rates. You'll see the annualization of Council-adopted 2025 investments reflected in the outlook. You'll see the boards and agencies' projections for 2026 reflective of what was presented in 2025. We don't have the most recent projections for boards and agencies for 2026, so what we've reflected is what was forecasted by boards and agencies through the 2025 budget process. And finally, you'll see fees and program revenues that are projected to offset some of the pressures with respect to property taxes, for instance. So moving on to the tax budget outlook. The report that's before you today is reflecting an average residential tax impact of 8.9%. And there's a number of themes or factors that make up that 8.9%. As I mentioned, infrastructure. And the increased investment in infrastructure represents approximately 2.7 of the 8.9%. So approximately 25% or a quarter of the overall tax increase is towards increases in infrastructure investment. A further 2.6% represents the cost of maintaining city services, and you'll see through some subsequent slides the breakdown of some of those factors that affect that 2.6% increase. As I just mentioned, the reserve strategy encompassed a 4-year strategy that called for reduction on reliance on reserves and the substitution of sustainable funding over that 4-year strategy. And you'll see that reduction in reserves, reliance of reserves, represents a further 1.9%. There are a series of council-referred items and business cases that are reflected in the budget outlook. These are one of the enhancements we're presenting through this budget outlook relative to previous budget outlooks. We would not have necessarily captured the comprehensive list of business cases, preliminary business cases, and council-referred items. So you will see in the staff report that while city departments forecast is decreasing by approximately 0.6% relative to what was forecasted for 2026 and 2025, the council-referred items and preliminary list of business cases is adding a further 0.9% relative to what was projected for 2026 through the 2025 budget process. And with respect, finally, to boards and agencies, we're reflecting a 0.8% contribution to the overall 8.9% residential impact. And I'll just highlight, and I'll highlight on a few occasions, that boards and agencies now captures public health within the boards and agencies program. A very busy slide, and I'm not going to punish committee by going through this slide in detail, but I'm going to highlight a few figures and try to unpack those figures. First off, what you'll see is city departments are projecting a maintenance budget, so effectively delivering the same services in 2026 as we are delivering in 2025 at the same service levels, accounting for inflationary and other pressures, on average about 5%. And you'll see some of the factors that contribute to that 5%. forecasted increase for 2026. Corporate financials and non-program revenues, some of the factors affecting that change, the decrease is the reserve strategy. The reliance on reserves was captured there. So as we wean ourselves off of reserves, that in part captures that change. What's also captured under corporate financials and non-program revenues is operating impacts of capital. A number of operating impacts of previously approved capital projects that were originally forecasted for 25 were deferred to 2026 as those projects were not substantially complete. So that too is a factor contributing to the corporate financial figures. As I mentioned previously, we're reflecting what the boards and agencies have projected in previous years. There's some reporting, some accounting between the conservation authorities and the rate budget as it relates to the stormwater rate that's contributing to that change. And you'll see that through the budget process, further defined through the budget process, as well as some changes with respect to the forecasting around the City Enrichment Fund, net of a council referred item as it relates to the City Enrichment Fund. So in terms of the maintenance budget, you'll see a levy increase of approximately 6.1%. What we are reporting is assessment growth of 1.7%. We remain relatively confident in that forecast for 2026, 1.7%. But I will highlight this is really reflective of building activity that occurred in 2024 or 2025. There's a lag between building activity and assessment. So as we look forward, we should expect some headwinds with respect to assessment growth in future years as we see the decline in building activity starting in 2024, carrying over in 2025, and more recently forecasts of some positive hope that that will start to reverse at the tail end of 2026. Some minor tax policy. This continues to be the shift between non-residential and residential. You'll see that there's no indication of a reassessment period, so we're not reflecting any changes in reassessment. This may be positive in the sense that we're seeing some normalization in market values of properties. So as properties continue to see some decline in values, they may be more representative of the values of those properties relative to a period, for instance, during the peak of the pandemic. And so one of the benefits of the deferral of the reassessment is allowing the marketplace to continue to play out and seeing that declines and avoiding a situation where a reassessment period is chosen that is reflective of the peak of property values that would cause a lot of challenges with respect to shifts. A few other areas I'll unpack. I've talked a bit about capital. What you'll see is in 2025, the capital levy as part of the overall levy was $190 million of the $1.3 billion levy. And that may be in the area of 14%. What you're seeing in terms of the forecast is capital's forecasted to increase by approximately $42 million, bringing the capital levy to $233 million relative to an overall levy of $13.75 billion, growing to about 16% of our overall levy. You'll see through subsequent slides the commitment towards infrastructure funding and what that has represented as a portion of the overall tax burden and how that is continuing to impact 2026 relative to 2025, but more significantly, the continuous doubling and increasing and similar increases in our infrastructure spending. With respect to business cases, the business cases represent approximately $5.8 million. I do want to highlight that these are a preliminary list of business cases and that city departments will continue to review their business cases, and senior leadership team will continue to review those business cases, to rationalize those business cases in the context of tax affordability. We clearly have heard and understood the challenges with respect to tax affordability. Departments are continuing to review their budgets. As I mentioned, this is an outlook, and leading up to the December budget presentation and through the balance deliberations, departments are reviewing their budgets as it relates to identifying potential opportunities for further efficiencies and savings. What you'll see in the report before committee today is approximately $19 million that's already reflected in the outlook as it relates to, in part, some financial adjustments such as the provincial uploading of the recycling program, as well as some savings through efficiencies that departments have already identified and some financial adjustments. I just want to highlight our work is not complete. We're continuing to review across departments opportunities for some further efficiencies and savings, and that information will continue to inform the balance of the 2026 budget deliberations, and we will bring those to council for your consideration if they require council's approval. With respect to the council referred items, the council referred items represent approximately $7.8 million in investments, and finally, that's a bit of a breakdown of the forecast of approximately 8.9%. So to unpack, sorry, let me just go back one slide. So the 2026 outlook, tax outlook, you'll see reflects an increase of approximately $131 million, or approximately 10.6%. And to unpack that $131.7 million, these are the principal 5 factors that drive that increase. Our employee-related costs, and these are for existing employees. This does not represent any additional employees. And this includes our collective bargaining commitments. This includes results from merit increases, job evaluations. It also includes employer benefits and government benefits. With respect to government benefits and employer benefits, where we're seeing the continued trend of higher than inflation pressures, is employer benefits, and more specifically, health benefits and dental benefits. We're projecting a 10% increase in the cost, and these are not improvements to the benefit plan. These are just the higher costs of providing benefits to our existing employees. This is not unique to Hamilton, and it's not unique to 2026. We've seen double-digit increases in employer benefits, more specifically health benefits, over the past number of years. So employee-related costs represent approximately 34% of the $131.7 million increase. Again, infrastructure investments represent another 1/3 of the $131.7 million increase. This includes asset management and investments, new investments in new infrastructure. What is reflected in the outlook is a 2.3% increase in our capital program, more commonly referred to as our block program, to offset inflationary pressures to the capital program. So trying to maintain the same level of funding into 2026, or purchasing power into 2026. It also reflects, and I will unpack this a little further in the next series of slides, it also reflects the continuation of the 10-year strategy for our transportation and engineered services. So additional funding towards asset management for transportation and engineered services. It also includes an increase in asset management for non-core services, effectively a doubling for the non-core, the other asset programs relative to 2025. So those are some of the factors affecting the increase in the infrastructure, forecasted infrastructure budget. As I mentioned previously, a reduced reliance on reserves, a reduction of approximately $30 million on reliance on reserves, and that makes up about 23% of the $131 million. Some of those factors include the reduction in terms of we drew on reserves to fund our collective agreement obligations, and we did that over a number of years to blend in the impact of our collective agreement obligations, as well as inflationary increases to our capital programs post-pandemic. We saw some extraordinary increases in our capital costs for previously approved projects, and we drew on reserves to offset that. You'll also see that we drew on reserves, as previously mentioned, for our housing sustainability investment roadmap, as well as for overall tax affordability to reduce the tax impact in 2024 and 25. And finally, you'll see that we drew on reserves to provide additional funding to Hamilton Police Services to offset their WSIB pressures, given that it would have been an extraordinary increase year over year for Hamilton Police Services to financially support their WSIB, and so we worked with Hamilton Police Services to phase that in over a number of years. Those are the principal factors that contributed to our reserve strategy, but I'll unpack that a little further. With respect to operating impacts of capital, where the outlook is reflecting $10.5 million. Some of these were originally reflected in our 2025 budget, but through our 2025 budget deliberations, we saw the opportunity to defer them as the timing was more appropriate for 2026. And so that represents approximately 8% of the overall $131.7 million. And finally, we have a placeholder with respect to the transit strategy, year 10 of the transit strategy, pending committee's discussions and deliberations going forward with respect to the next phase of the HSR transit strategy, and that represents $3.9 million or 3% of the increase. So these are the principal 5 factors that make up the increase of approximately $131.7 million. So again, a bit of a busy slide. The top line represents our gross capital budget. And really what it captures is both our asset management and the investments we make into enabling growth and development. When we control for the growth and development factor, what you're seeing is that increasing trend line with respect to the city's investment into our capital program, and more specifically into asset management. And so, again, that is a principal factor that is driving our 2026 forecast as we continue to implement the asset management strategies for both core and non-core services. Not only are we reflecting a significant increase in 2026, which followed a significant increase in 2025, but we're seeing a forecasted further 20% increase in 2027, and then a further 20% increase in 2028. This is one of the areas that staff and council can further review in terms of tax affordability, is that pace of investment into our capital program. Not suggesting, not increasing the investment in capital, but just the pace that we've experienced and are forecasting to experience with respect to the capital program. What would alleviate some of the pressures with respect to tax and rate, and we've discussed this many times, is funding from senior levels of government. That's the most immediate opportunity to affect tax affordability for local residents. Being successful as it relates to leveraging funding, whether it's for our water and wastewater programs or for our tax supported programs. So as I mentioned, Council has approved a capital financing plan that saw our capital, the portion of the tax levy that's being invested towards capital, effectively doubling in 2024 relative to, for instance, 2022. And then it doubled again in 2025. And then we're seeing another 50% increase in 2026. So just wanting to highlight the significant investments we have been making towards infrastructure, recognizing that we often hear from the community the need towards replacing infrastructure that's end of life and requires investments, but as well as embarking on some new investments in new infrastructure. Examples would include the maintenance and storage facility and some of the investments in our paramedic services as we look forward. Reserve strategy. Council approved a 4-year reserve strategy that saw us rely on reserves to fund one-time investments as well as some ongoing investments towards our housing sustainability investment roadmap. And you'll see that the reliance on reserves for HSIR really dropped off in 2025 relative to 2024 because some of those were one-time investments. And so we identified the funding for those one-time investments through the 2024 commitments. And then finally, we're forecasting a further reduction on reliance on reserves so that we're no longer reliant on reserves for HSIR beyond 2026. Similarly, you'll see with respect to the extraordinary inflation we experienced post-pandemic, as well as about $8 million in reserves that we are relying on to build back with respect to the cyber incident. You'll see that that was reduced in 2025 and is forecast to be eliminated and reducing the reliance on reserves to offset some of those pressures in 2026. As well, with respect to the DC exemptions, you'll see that we funded historical DC exemptions. So these were exemptions that were previously approved many years, in some cases a decade and a half ago, that were not properly funded. And so Council has approved a strategy to fund those as well as existing DC exemptions. We reduced the tax impact in 2024 and 25 in part by drawing on reserves, but you can see that the outlook that's before you is reflecting a reduction on reliance on reserves for DC exemptions in 2026. The final category is around tax affordability, and this is principally our collective agreements, and some of the pressures are collective agreements, health benefits, and our support towards Hamilton Police Services to offset some of their WSIB costs. And you can see that we're forecasting to reduce that or eliminate that reliance by 2027. And so while Council approved a reliance on reserves that was more aggressive in 2024, that was reduced by over half in 2025, you can see that the outlook that before you reflects a further reduction, and then finally eliminating that reliance on reserves as it relates to some of those challenges we were facing at the start of this term of Council. That will lead us to a structurally balanced budget, not having reliance on reserves, but having then reliance on sustainable sources of revenue. But that contributes in part, if you go back to that pie chart, that contributes in part to that 8.9% forecast for 2026. With respect to the report that's before you, we just wanted to provide some indication of some mitigating measures with respect to our current forecast. If Committee and Council chose to defer the increase, the approximately $40 million increase in infrastructure, if business cases were not to proceed And, and with respect to the council referred items, if those were not to proceed, that in total would represent a reduction of approximately 2.3%. Staff are not recommending these. We're wanting to demonstrate or illustrate some of the options that committee and council will have before you through your deliberations. As I mentioned previously, with respect to infrastructure and the pace of our investment towards infrastructure, as I mentioned previously, the business cases have not been fully reviewed and vetted by senior leadership team, and so those two may change in terms of the magnitude and the number of business cases. And finally, through the balance of deliberations, council may wish to consider the items that have been referred to the budget process for consideration for 2026. Shifting now to the 2026 water budget outlook. You'll see through the outlook report some revisions, and unlike the tax-supported program where we're projecting increases to our towards tax-supported assets, what we're reflecting in the outlook is a decline in our capital investment in 2025 or 6 relative to what was being forecasted for 2026 through the 2025 budget. So this is simply a deferral, and it's really the wastewater treatment plant, the Woodward wastewater treatment plant, as staff better size up the timing and the necessary investments relative to the delivery of that program. You'll see some of those forecasted investments are being deferred to 2027. So not a reduction in the overall project, but a change in the potential timing for those investments. So infrastructure capital, though, continues to be a significant component to the overall 2026 water budget outlook, as well as we're reflecting the potential transition to utility billing in 2026. And so we continue to work towards a transition from electric providing utility billing to the city now providing utility billing. And so while that was forecasted for earlier than the start of 2026, we are forecasting somewhere in the spring of 2026 with respect to utility billing. And there's a separate report that will be coming to council on that issue. Stormwater funding model is reflected in the 2026 budget outlook. And finally, the flooding and drainage master plan is reflected as a factor to the 2026.
GM Zagarek, I hate to interrupt you at this moment. I just need a further extension of time. It's moved by Councillor. I think everybody has rapt attention. We know this is very important and serious, and we don't want it to rush you in your delivery. It's moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Beattie. And I'm going to, would 20 minutes, do you think be?
Through the chair, I think I'm 5 minutes to the completion of it, so thank you for the extension.
Not at all. So we'll do, Elsie McRae is giving me 10, so thank you. Thank you, members. Please.
Thank you.
We do need an e-vote for that. No, thank you, clerk. The vote is up. Councillor McMeekin, yep. And Councillor Taddiston is up. Councillor Francis. Yes, he is. Okay. Thank you. My apologies. Please continue.
Thank you.
That carries unanimously.
Thank you for that extension. With respect to the water budget outlook, some of the same factors you would have seen on the tax-supported employee-related costs, increasing approximately 4.8%, and that, again, is principally our collective bargaining obligations as well as benefits. Plant operations and maintenance is increasing 4.3%, including some pressures with some of the supplies that go into plant operations, for instance, chlorine as an example of one. Capital financing, you'll see a reduction of 10.6%. That really speaks to the timing for capital investments for our wastewater program, principally our Woodwood wastewater treatment plant. And what that results in is a increase in reserves, assuming a 10% rate increase for 2026. So I'll unpack that a bit for the benefit of committee. As I mentioned, for 2026 through the 2025 budget, we were assuming approximately $232 million in capital investments in our water capital budget. Currently, we're forecasting just short of $200 million. And again, assuming a 10% tax increase, that reduction in the need for capital investment then gets transferred into our reserve contribution. So the opportunity for committee and staff to deliberate on is whether there's an opportunity to reduce that rate in 2026. It's almost like a blend and extend, where we would then extend and catch up on that increase in future years. I'm not in a position to suggest what that might look like at this time. What we need to reflect is then the future forecast with respect to the capital program, and you can see they are being revised slightly down in future years with respect to 2027 and 2028. It's not a change in the total value of the project. It's just the cash flow of the project, the potential timing of the deliverables of that project, and when we would have to provide the funding to support that timing of the project. And so this will get further unpacked when the 2026 water budget is presented. But one opportunity is to reduce the contribution to reserves. That assumes a 10% rate increase, reduce that 10% to support the capital program, support a contribution to reserves still. What we want to avoid, or what we've tried to avoid in past years, is to budget for the bottom and then have a significant increase in future years. What we've tried to do is sort of blend the investment strategy. And so that will be an opportunity in the coming weeks as we work towards the delivery of the 2026 water budget. We heard clearly from council and the community the interest for enhanced public engagement. And so there are a series of in-person meetings that are being planned for this month to give citizens across the municipality the opportunity to be heard as it relates to their budget priorities or priorities of city services, and that is being worked towards, as well as a virtual citywide meeting being hosted at the same time, sometime in the month of September. You might have recalled the Balancing Act was a tool that we launched for the first time in 2025, and looking to launch again the Balancing Act and look to make some improvements in terms of the citizens' opportunity to participate in the balancing and discussions with respect to the 2026 preliminary budgets, as well as an online survey. So this would be new, providing citizens the opportunity through an online survey to provide some indication of priorities with respect to city services, and recognizing that the budget, requiring a balanced budget, municipalities, it also often involves trade-offs, and that's what the Balancing Act provides, and the survey will also highlight the opportunity for citizens and residents to identify their priorities, as well as areas where there may be efficiencies or savings. And then finally, the two formal delegation dates that we are working towards in the month of November and January. And through the budget chair, I just want to thank committee for the opportunity to present an overview of the budget outlook. As I mentioned in my opening comments, it really is a starting point for council and staff as we prepare for the budget deliberations. And if there are any questions of committee, happy to try to answer those. And we have talent across the organization available to committee today as well. So thank you.
Thank you, GM Securic. Before we entertain questions, if I can have a mover, Councillor McMeekin, seconded by Councillor Kazar, just to receive the receipt of this presentation and the report, and we'll get it on the floor. So I think that's, do I have to do that? We're good? Okay, I don't have to do that. All right. So I do have some folks who have some questions of you. I guess, GM Zakaric, would you prefer to stay because those questions may be referring to some of your slides, or would you prefer to sit anywhere?
So through the deputy, through the budget chair, standing is a little more comfortable. So I will stand and then I can sit if I need to. Thank you, though.
I wanted to ask you without specific reference to that matter, but thank you. Okay, up is Councillor Wang, followed by Councillor Spadafora, and then Councillor Alex Wilson and Councillor McMeekin. Councillor Wang.
Thank you for this presentation. I have 3 questions through you, Budget Chair. First is, how are we accounting for risk in this budget outlook? Because this is just an outlook at this time, but we have actually received, there has been a lot of huge challenges, and especially with those external factors that you talked about in the very early part of this presentation. So how do we account for risk in this outlook?
So through the chair, where we're seeing greater risk is on our infrastructure side with respect to some of those external factors. And as I mentioned previously, we've adjusted our starting point in terms of infrastructure by increasing the blocks by approximately 2.3%. There isn't any indication of the same extraordinary pressure we experienced post-pandemic. We're just not hearing yet of those extraordinary increases in the delivery of municipal projects. Not to suggest that they may not be forthcoming, because as trade and tariffs fully get reflected in the broader economy, that may materialize. So a few ways that we are addressing it, as I mentioned, is the 2.3. Asset management provides for the opportunity, those investments provide for the opportunity, if required, to reprioritize funding to offset, to reduce our reliance on reserves as we had to do coming out of the pandemic. But in terms of if we experience that, I would expect we would come back before committee and council to provide opportunities including additional funding, but opportunities that may include having to reprioritize projects if we experience some of that same extraordinary pressure on our infrastructure side. With respect to the majority of our operating costs, 45% of our operating costs are employee-related costs. We've reflected many of the knowns in terms of we know what our collective agreements are. We have a sense in terms of our benefit pressures. So we've reflected that in the outlook. I don't expect further adjustments increasing the impact into 2026 as it relates to employee-related costs. We're confident we've captured what we are expecting and what the industry is expecting around benefits for 2026. And then with respect to some of the other factors, we're actually seeing relief. We're seeing relief as it relates to fuel prices. And you would have seen that in the variance report. Those service areas that are reliant on vehicles and fuel, we're experiencing some of that relief, and that is reflected in the outlook. And the final comment, with respect to the development community, what we've already reflected in the outlook is the forecasted decline in residential and non-residential as it relates to development charge credits and exemptions. So we've already made some adjustments, reducing the amount of funding that may be required in 2026. But we're making some assumptions that that will ramp up potentially in 2027. Not back to the level of funding required in 2023, but we're hoping for some improvement relative to 2024 and 5.
Okay. So I'm going to speak a little bit more on the capital investment side, specifically as it relates to water, just because this past week, Ward 4 suffered a significant water main break. That significant water main break affected 16 houses, which now looks at, from a risk management perspective, digging into our reserves and all of that. But these pipes are from 1859 and 1888. So my concern now is that as we are pushing out the capital investments further and further out, do we increase our risk at more catastrophic failures in our infrastructure as we continue to push out those investments?
Yeah. Through the budget chair, thank you for the question. So thank you for the opportunity to be a little clearer. The deferral of some of the water programs are not asset management programs. They are some of the expansion programs, our large capital programs. Water and wastewater forms part of the core assets, which council currently has adopted a 10-year. So we have an aggressive financing strategy towards our water and wastewater asset management. That's not what we're looking to defer on the water side. It's just the timing for some of those big projects.
Okay, excellent then. My last question is as it relates to slide 10, which is the capital expenditures forecast. And the way that you have it listed out is that the gross, it dips down in 2023, it increases in 2025, it dips down in 2027 and increases in 2028. However, this council has also talked about a buy local, buy Canadian strategy. So is there another option here where we might see that gross be on a different sort of trend line? My concern is that we have a lot of Canadian industry that may want to look at us as a municipality to help offset some of the external factors affecting industry as a whole. So I wonder, with that dip from 2025 to 2027, is there another trend line that might look at it as how do we help offset some of the challenges that are affecting our, maybe our steel industry, so I don't know what that looks like, so I'm just asking, what is the opportunity here?
Yeah.
And those are good questions. We're going to have you at time after that question. If you'd like to go back on,
Okay.
please proceed.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
Through the chair, the outlook already reflects it. Opportunity. What you're seeing is a significant increase in the infrastructure program. There continues to be opportunity as we fine-tune our procurement policy to leverage Canadian and local components into our procurement, and so those conversations will continue before council in the coming months as we do some further engagements with, for instance, the steel industry. Some of those peaks on that graph, in part, were driven by funding from senior levels of government. Maintenance and storage facility is a big project that would have affected that peak. So with respect to opportunity, the opportunity is for senior levels of government to partner and make investments into infrastructure in an effort to support up the economy, both local and national economy. So that continues to be an opportunity, and as staff, we continue to try to maximize those opportunities as it relates to our share of the funding.
Thank you. Up now, I have Councillor Spatafora.
Thank you, Budget Chair, and once you let me know if I've reached my max, I'd like to go on a second time, please. Thank you. Jim Zagaric, thank you for the presentation. I tried to be efficient this morning and actually put page numbers so I know what I'm talking about and I just don't ramble on about stuff people don't want to hear. So my first question is page 4 of 20 in your report, operating budget drivers. The last line there says 10.5 million for operating impacts of capital. So I hear operating, I'm assuming, is this, like, are these FTEs pressures? When we talk about operating impacts, is that, how many FTEs would be part of that impact? Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, I don't have the specific number of FTEs. It would be a combination of employee-related costs as well as operating costs. So for instance, if it's a recreation center, there would be some additional staff required, plus the costs of utilities, security, and other associated costs. So it would be a combination.
Thank you. And I'm assuming as we get into the detailed budget, that's when you'll, or whoever will provide the actual FTEs that'll be needed for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair, that information will form part of the budget documents.
Thank you. Next question is on page 5 of 10. Again, capital budget drivers. You presented, I think, in 2025, $20 million or so, or maybe I'm wrong, I'm in a surplus. Now we have a $10 million required for new debt. So is this, I mean, having a surplus of $20+ million, now we got servicing requirements for new debt of 10 million. Again, are these just rough numbers and that's why they're not accurate? Like, how accurate is that number going to be? Since last year we had a pretty big surplus.
Through the chair, these are estimates. So the 2025 surplus reflects the timing with respect to debt issuance. I expect we will do a debt issuance before the end of this calendar year, and then a further debt issuance sometime maybe in the first quarter, somewhere in that $120 million combined, 120 to 150 million. Important to note, this debt is related to projects previously approved and are substantially complete. So we're not issuing debt, first off. Debt is only for capital. We can only issue debt for capital. Secondly, this is not debt that we're issuing in anticipation of future projects. This is debt that we are issuing because previously approved projects are at substantial completion. So what drives that factor is the timing of those projects and our strong financial liquidity in that we can try to find that sweet spot in terms of when we go out to market to issue debt, and we see that opportunity at the end of this year and first quarter of next year.
Budget Chair, time for another one more? Perfect, thank you. Where am I going? Page 10 of 20. We talk a lot around this horseshoe on how we need the higher levels of government to support us. And I think that's probably the one thing around this table that I don't think anybody would have an argument over, which is interesting. But it is the one thing I think we all believe is true. So I see here near the second bottom of the page, we're talking about some investments from federal and provincial governments. What is our chances of getting this money, Mike? And if we don't get it, like, what position does that put you in? So we don't get it, like, yeah, we hope we get it. The mayor's going to work her, magic trying to get it. If we don't get it, what do we do?
So through the chair, let me refer to the variance report. So through the 2025 budget, we assume $14 million for housing and shelters from senior levels of government. We realize about $3 million of that $14 million to date. So that's already captured and reflected in the 2025 variance report, and that's one of the driving factors to Healthy and Safe Communities variance for 2025. And so just to illustrate the impact that has, it is a contributing factor to our 2025 variance, in part offset through some of the capital financing savings.
So we asked for 14.2 from the federal and provincial government, and we've got 3 so far.
Through the chair, that's correct.
They're really pulling their share. Next one for me. So page 12, where am I here? So under some of these, I got a couple questions on this table you have here. So the second, number 2 and number 4. So the first one, there's an impact of, I guess that's 13.2 million. So I'm just wondering what that is for. And then my last one, which I don't know that you would be able to answer, because we're looking at a $6.6 million impact, and my fleet optimization or utilization report I haven't seen it come here. So I'm assuming that number could change based on what we're going to get out of my fleet optimization or utilization report, which is the number 4. And then number 2 just talks about result of reserves used in 2025 to offset financial impacts that are not utilized in 2025, thereby causing a pressure. So 13.2 million. What are we talking about?
So
and then I'll go on a second time, Chair, if that's okay. Thank you.
So through the chair, the 13.2 million under point 2 in table 4 speaks to a component of the $29 million in the slide presentation to you, where we're reducing reliance on reserves by $29 million and having to offset that in part through the 2026 budget outlook. The $6.6 million, notwithstanding we've leveraged reserves for those reasons I've highlighted through this morning's presentation. We've still made investments into reserves for the replacement of vehicles, for employee liability, employee pension obligations. And so I don't want to leave the impression with committee and council is we've leveraged reserves but not contributed back to reserves. That's what the 6.6 million includes, contributions back to reserves. You'll see it across the organization, often as it relates to vehicles, but equipment as well, where we are planning towards replacing vehicles and equipment through reserves versus through tax and debt.
Thanks, Budget Chair. I'll wait for you to call me again.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions of clarification jumping all around. The first, starting with the reserve strategy, and that I think it's 23, 24, just under a quarter of the new spending being reserve related. Just trying to change the framing. So we're talking about this as a reduced reliance on reserves. Is another accurate way to say this one-time or emergency pressures, whether that be provincial legislation with DCs, the housing crisis, inflation, what's going on with tariff, these one-time things that we used reserves for, that we didn't have a sustainable funding source, are a quarter of the increase in spending, or just under a quarter of the increase in spending. So it's not it's a reduction on our side, but from the folks paying the bill or from that other perspective, about a quarter of this increase is because we're covering things that didn't have a funding source for them.
Through the chair, I would say yes, fair in part.
Okay.
The investments include one time, we made $30 million as towards the Housing Sustainability Investment Roadmap. That's not $30 million each and every year. That was one time. We made a number of one-time investments that made up the reserve strategy. But some of the investments are ongoing investments, such as employee-related costs, WSIB pressures that aren't one-time, some adjustments to the capital program were one-time. So it's a combination of ongoing and one-time, hence the need to support those ongoing costs through a sustainable revenue source.
And so this is the strategy working under an assumption that there's not another one-time spend, there's not another piece of provincial legislation that mandates covering something we don't have a funding. This is kind of a business as usual forecast forward. If there was an emergent need, this forecast would change.
Through the chair, that's correct, based on the information we know to date.
Okay. Next question is just about the budget meetings in September. Where are these, when are these, and when can the public find information about where to find them? Does this reference councillor-hosted meetings that staff are attending, or is staff hosting their own engagements in the fall outside of the virtual citywide meeting? Just trying to focus on those around the city meetings.
So through the chair, it's my understanding that these will be hosted by elected officials supported by staff across the municipality. I had the good fortune of being in one in Ward 7, not through this formal budget process, but similar to those engagements, the opportunity for citizens to be heard. And I believe that is being finalized in terms of the timing and the location for those events.
If I may interject for a moment and recognize the city manager, please.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. And not to correct my colleague at all, but to enhance what he's saying, the budget engagement sessions will be announced shortly. So tomorrow and into Monday, the communications will go out. To be clear, though, they're being hosted with staff and the mayors. And you'll see information and invitations soon. So they'll be across the city to make sure all of the wards are represented, but that's the mechanism.
And if I was on the city's budget website by the end of the week or early next week, that's where I'd be able to find that information as a member of the public? Is it, we're intending to post it on the budget website?
Yes, there'll be a number of different mechanisms to communicate this so that we can get that message out broadly. It will be starting at the end of this week and will be carried through into next week as well.
Thank you so much. I just have two quick questions left. One of them I think we've answered a couple times. I'm just trying to ask it a different way. It's about the water delay. if I'm looking at this chart, we're only seeing reductions. You've explained why we're seeing reductions. Those add up to about $60 million over 3 years. So is what's actually happening is what we've done is we've pushed $60 million to 2029 or later, and that's based on project information. It's not based on tax affordability. It's not based on delaying anything. It's just those projects won't be ready till a little later than we thought. But the scope of the projects hasn't changed. So it's accurate to understand that there is still $60 million we have to invest, just not in the next 3 years, but after that.
Yeah. Through the chair, that's correct. So
Okay.
the scope has not changed, and the projects, we have not purposely pushed the projects for affordability. This is simply reflecting the expected timelines with respect to those projects and refining them based on current information.
Thank you. My last question, I think Councillor Spatafor asked some of these. I'm going to just kind of ask it in a more general way. What are a couple of the biggest pressures that are going to change this forecast between now and when we finalize the budget? So one of them being the recreation master plan conversation tomorrow that has a deferral to the 2026 budget process that has definitely a potential for investment in recreation assets on it. What are some of those other pieces? And can you speak to some of the impacts they might have, or just what's going to change between now and the next 4 months that we know is coming?
So through the chair, it could be the master plans, whether it's recreation, it could be the transit strategy as that comes before. And so those may be pressures, but there may be opportunities as well. So as the departments to review our capital investment plans as it relates to enabling growth, given the current status of growth, there may be opportunities to better reflect the pace of growth and the opportunity to alleviate some of the pressures. And that would really positively impact our debt profile, because our debt profile very much reflects the reliance to support growth. And so we just want to right size the timing for the growth enabling projects. So just beyond pressures, just wanting to highlight a potential opportunity as well.
Thank you. And sorry, the two master plans were I'm correct, the recreation one, you mentioned the transit one, and just there's not a third very large pressure that we know is coming. I just like things that we know about that are forthcoming on committee meetings between now and then that are going to have a referral to the 2026 process. That's a somewhat accurate summary. Those are the two big ones.
So through the chair, I'll invite any other members of senior leadership team if there's something that they're aware of that I just haven't identified.
I'm not seeing anyone unless the city manager would like to address the matter.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I'm so sorry, I missed the question, which is why I'm looking at you blankly.
I think I've heard the answer pretty clearly. No one's jumping up, but what I'm asking is just, we know that tomorrow's recreation master plan has a potential investment of, $40 to $50 million a year, some of the alternatives, later this afternoon's recreation master plan. And so just, are there other plans like that have multi-million-dollar investment strategies that we know are going to be in front of this body in the next 3 months that would impact this number? And I've heard this and transit are the two ones in consideration right now, just seeking confirmation there's not maybe a third.
Through you, Madam Chair, those are the two big ones that are known, yes. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Up next, just so folks know, Councillor Kassar, followed by Councillor Kretsch, Jackson, Francis, Pauls, Clark, Beatty, and then we'll likely be on to second-time speakers, but I don't see Councillor McMeekin on there, and I know he had indicated, so I'm going to use the prerogative to put you between, because I did see you earlier, Councillor Kretsch and Councillor Jackson, if that's okay. Councillor Kassar.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Alex Wilson asked a couple of questions I had. One remaining question for now to GM Zagarek is with regards to the benefit we get from tax assessment growth from 1.7% we're showing on there. And I'm fine if this is an offline discussion, but at the end of the process, we typically, and I like to share, here's the percentage increase tied to city operations, to capital, to business cases, to boards and agencies. How does that 1.7 in this case for 2026 estimated get spread across that? Because what you shared is here's all the increases, and then it was kind of at the bottom that you had that reduction. But it somehow, when we summarize the overall impact of each of those categories I mentioned, is it prorated, or is there an easy answer to that, or is that an offline discussion for you, Chair?
Through the chair, there is an easy answer. It's global. It's at the bottom. We apply the assessment growth to reduce the overall tax impact. It's not distributed to program areas as it relates to either their operating or capital. It is simply used to reduce the tax burden.
Okay, thanks for that. That generates some questions, but I'll take them offline. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Critch, please.
Thank you. I want to ask some different questions and try to do that every year to get a better understanding of things that I see in the report or things that I think frankly aren't that clear to either us or the public. One of the things that you mentioned in your report, you used the words keeping up with inflation. As I'm going to save you a lot of time by summarizing some things you said in previous years. You said that inflation doesn't directly relate to all municipal services, and that using national inflation numbers doesn't always provide us a clear picture of how that relates to municipal expenses. However, oftentimes the pressures we feel are actually higher than the number that inflation is. So inflation gives us a very low baseline number, but actually the percentage is probably, or the impact is probably higher actually for that. I ask because there have been several instances where council has decided to go ahead with budgets that are lower than inflation. Can you please unpack the impact of inflation and the impact of choosing to go with a budget that's lower than inflation? And then I have a couple follow-up questions.
So firstly, while we don't prepare a municipal price index, some municipalities have in the past prepared a municipal price index versus a consumer price index to better reflect the bundles of goods or services that we rely on versus in a household. So for instance, municipalities don't typically procure a lot of food, clothing, that are factors in terms of consumer price index. Historically, the municipal price index has outpaced the consumer price index. We understand citizens and community have an understanding of the consumer price index, and that often becomes a reference point. Our challenge, not just City of Hamilton municipalities, our bundle of goods or services are reliant on inputs that typically exceed households' experience in terms of inflation. We've talked a bit about infrastructure, so the impact trade and tariffs may have. That yes, it impacts households, but when 20% of your budget is for infrastructure, that's going to have a more material impact. If there's relief households are receiving on food and clothing, that's not relief we're receiving. I mentioned 45% of our budget is employee-related costs. We have our collective bargaining, but we have our 10% forecast increase for benefits. That's how municipalities' experience with inflation, I would say, varies with households.
And so you don't have a way to really to perfectly quantify that, but I guess what you're saying is with a bit of math, we could probably figure out what the impact is, generally speaking. So I'll follow up with you offline. Leads me to my second question. Oftentimes when I send emails during the budget process, I know I can ask this question offline, but I think it's important to also recognize the staff who do this work. I could send them to you as a general manager and you would say, maybe don't send them all directly to me. Who are our main contacts during the budget process that we should send questions to?
So through the chair, the talent is not me. The talent is our acting director, Kirk Weaver. I would say our 3 F&A managers who support the GMs and their departments. We'll take that away with the budget chair and develop a process, as we have in the last 2 years, on how to collect all of the questions and disseminate all of the answers to all of committee. So happy to reinstate some of the practices that we've done in the last 2 years, if that's helpful.
Thanks. My second question is really about the financial information return or the FIR. Could you speak a little bit, because what we get here is not the same as what happens when we compile and submit our financial information return. In fact, the categories there are often different, and there's a lot of dispute every year, whether we realize it or not, about what's represented in our information return versus what's represented here in the budget. And so I just want to know the timing of the FIR with respect to the actual budget we're discussing now, when that will come out, so we can have that discussion then. I'm going to bring a motion forward because I think a comparative analysis of these 2 documents for everybody here would be beneficial. I do not do it on my own, but I think we'd all benefit from the insight, frankly.
Yeah. Through the chair, what the councillor's highlighting is because of the cyber incident, we haven't been able to produce our traditional annual reporting. As previously communicated, we're working towards completing our 2023 year end by fall of this year. I would expect then, final external audit and the FIR maybe in the first quarter of next year. And then continuing with that pattern is working towards our 2024 year end, sometime maybe spring, summer of 2025, and then the FIR would follow 2-3 months after that, and then similarly with respect to 2025. That's what we are currently working towards with respect to the completion of our year ends, and then the financial information returns that we submit to the province.
And so if I understand it, just from a basic perspective, we're always going to be in a lag situation, right? We're going to approve our budget, then we're going to submit our FIR, and then we're going to be really looking in the budget year back to the previous year's FIR for comparisons, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Through the chair, my hope is that we are out of this period of disruption as it relates to the FIRs and more into a typical period sometime in 2027 going into 2028 in terms of the timing, traditional timing of our financial information returns.
And so for us right now, 2022 is our comparative year.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. I just think it's important because when we're looking back at or trying to analyze or think about how our financial information return relates to our budget process, we're kind of out of date by about 4 years in terms of that comparison. So it might not be very beneficial.
Thank you, Councillor Kretsch. You're at time, but I think you do have a meeting to attend to. Do you have another single
I
question?
have just last
Okay.
question.
My prerogative, please go.
Thank you. So you talked about assessment and building growth and the impact of the assessment and building growth. And I just would like you very briefly for you to say a little bit more about that. If I understand correctly what you're saying, the private market determines how much housing gets built. That directly impacts our assessment growth. When the private market gambles the wrong way, or it doesn't work out in the way we hope it's going to, they overbuild in one area and aren't able to sell, whatever happens, right? However that works in the private market, that whole housing picture directly affects our assessment, and we have no direct control over that necessarily.
Yeah. Through the chair, the disruption is not necessarily where the private sector has developed. That assessment will be captured. It's where they've stalled or paused or canceled projects, future projects. And so while there is inventory, currently vacant inventory within the municipality, that will be captured. That will form part of our assessment either for this year or next year. But we saw drops in development activity starting in 2024, further in 2025, projected in 2026. That will affect that 1.7% we're currently reflecting for 2026, for 2027 and 2028. So we're not expecting an impact this year, but we are expecting impacts in terms of that assessment growth figure in future years.
Thanks, and I appreciate everyone's patience. There's just a legal matter on a board I chair, and I have to attend a meeting about that, so I have to leave a little early. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McMeekin, who has the best shirt on in the building.
Terry Fox, Sunday, be I think my 35th run or walk. I'm walking now, I'm not running anymore. Anyhow, important. Mr. Zakaric, I appreciate your presentation's meant as an overview, so I'm going to make an overview comment to begin and then dig in. At this point, I'm not into detail. You are. You remind me of the person with the Toronto Maple Leafs who handles adjustments to the cap so they can bring in new players to win a Stanley Cup. You know, it's not very well. Thank you for that.
Watch the Toronto Maple Leaf cut there. Just be careful.
This is the year.
I'll come down heavy. I got a gavel.
Okay, so if I'm hearing correctly, by way of overview, water rates are up. We've set that out. Stormwater rates are here. some constituents are differentially impacted. Growth in the economy is struggling. Unemployment is tracking up. Housing values appear to be in a period of decline. Tariff challenges are here or pending. You suggested we may be on the brink of a recession. So by way of backdrop, there are resolutions around staffing, no increase in staffing, some comment on that. What's the projection there? I have a second question, if you want to just list them. Staffing's one. What are we doing around revenues? Because this council, as you know, was directive around identifying new sources of revenue. And I haven't heard anything about the looming hospital challenge. I think that was in the neighborhood of about $354 million to redevelop, and a big debate about where that cost should fall. So given the overview you're presenting, which is gray if not dark, somewhere between 6.6 and 8.9 just seems like something that is going to be very, very difficult to communicate. So any wise counsel on any of that would be appreciated. Thanks. That's me for today in my entirety. Thanks.
So through the chair, with respect to wise counsel, I think that's information that will be forthcoming in terms of staff's preliminary budget. We wanted to reflect, as Councillor McMeekin reiterated, some of the local environment as well as some of the global factors. The one I'll just highlight is, while yes, housing prices are declining, they're still much higher than they were pre-pandemic. And so one would expect this natural correction in terms of housing prices. So not to leave the impression that overall housing prices are trending down. In some ways, I think it's a positive that housing prices are declining from their peak. Just with respect to revenues, just to highlight is we are reliant, 45% of our tax budget is supported through property taxes. We're reliant principally on property taxes, and there's other fees and charges. And in the context of what staff have identified as sort of the external factors, and Councillor McMeekin reiterated, staff have recommended and council's recommended a number of measures in the last few months, whether it's the temporary development charge exemption program, whether it's holding the line on other fees and charges. So I don't know that there will be an opportunity to increase revenues. In fact, what we've tried to do is to support the broader community by holding the line and extending some further temporary relief with respect to fees and charges. So I don't know that there will be a significant opportunity to us with respect to non-tax revenues. We are assuming, with respect to user fees and inflationary adjustment, in that 3.6% range, I believe. Some program areas will present close to cost recovery. Some program areas will not be in a position because of the market to recommend recovery increases to user fees. So I just want to manage any expectations as it relates to the potential growth in non-tax revenues. In fact, we're leveraging those tools to support the broader community with respect to some of the challenges they're facing.
That's helpful. One final quick point, Madam Chair. The idea of a municipal price index twigged my imagination in terms of a comms strategy. I don't think our citizenry, at least the good people I have the privilege of representing, would understand much beyond the consumer price index and what they're paying every single day for all of the things you mentioned, clothes, food, et cetera. That might be worth exploring in terms of drawing attention to why some factors here are beyond CPI referenced concern. The other thing that I notice, a note, is in the previous years, I had the privilege of being part of it in a different era. Perhaps there was major investment in the Woodward Avenue treatment plant, tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Are we anticipating that that's something that is that one of the key attacks in terms of looking for provincial and federal dollars?
So through the chair, there is an assumption that you'll see that was reflected in the 2025 water budget. I believe it was $100 million. And the councillor has good recollection because it was the Ministry of Agriculture, I believe in 2008, that provided $100 million at that time towards a $300 million project. And so we're not seeing that same magnitude. It's something that we are advocating for, but there's no commitment to at this time.
You didn't mention hospital at all.
Oh, through the chair, apologize. So we're not reflecting a local contribution or a tax levy increase towards the hospitals. We continue to have dialogue with our hospital partners with respect to the potential timing and their application process and the need for a local contribution. I believe publicly there's been some statement that the foundations will be working towards some contributions, and there may be an opportunity for the municipality to support in general the investments, but we are not at a time when we need to present to council a financial commitment from the municipality. Not suggesting that this isn't part of the provincial model. It continues to be dialogue in terms of some of the challenges municipalities are facing and the mandated responsibility for healthcare and where that lies.
Thank you. That's your time. Thank you very much. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you, Budget Chair Maureen Wilson, and good morning. Thank you, General Manager Zagarek, for starting off the 2026 budget discussions today at a high level. It's a very gloomy picture. 8.9%, 6.6% would definitely be unacceptable to my everyday taxpayers. So let me get to some questions, please. There will be two separate documents this year, back to the traditional operating and capital and not squished together like it was in 2025. Through you, Budget Chair Wilson, please.
Through the chair, we've been directed to prepare one document for the tax-supported budget, so an operating capital, but we will deliver a separate document of the detailed project sheets that was requested through the 2025 budget, and so we will do that, and then a separate water and wastewater budget.
So capital will still be embedded within the operating then, General Manager Zagarek?
Through the chair, that was the direction of council to have one consolidated tax budget, but we will supplement that with the capital detail sheets.
Okay, so an addendum for capital, I appreciate that. Not ideal for me, but if I was a little asleep at the switch and pushing harder for the two separate traditional docs, I'll accept responsibility. I didn't want to reference the first report from the 25 variance, but I thought I'd apply it here. And maybe it's just naivety on my part, General Manager Zagarek, but you show a 14.5 variance surplus from 2025. Is that to be applied potentially? That's a good 1%. Is that to be applied potentially to the 8.9, or am I missing something from that variance and that surplus? Through you, Budget Chair Wilson.
Through the chair, that's an opportunity. We've traditionally applied a portion of the capital financing towards the future years capital financing strategy. So that is an opportunity, and I believe we've already made some assumption of about $2.5 million of capital financing. But again, we'll provide that update through the preliminary budget.
Thank you. Okay, a little bit of hope. How many of the 800 approximate that this term of council has approved, how many of the 800 full-time employees have been hired up to now? Approximated, please, through you, Budget Chair Wilson. Any idea, GM?
Through the chair, I wouldn't have, recognizing the majority of those employees were in some of our frontline services, whether it's transit, paramedic services. I'm going to assume a majority of those have been recruited and hired, but I don't have that information.
Here's where I'm going with this, General. And could you give me a breakdown, too, of the unionized amount of the 800 versus non-unionized of the 800? Or would they all have been unionized employees, to your knowledge?
To the chair, the majority would have been unionized frontline staff.
Here's where I'm going to help this potential budget, hypothetically, GM, is that if 200 of the 800 have not been hired yet, could we possibly bring that back and put a pause? And that may be a consideration for this council going into 2026.
So through the chair, that's always an opportunity. I want to highlight the work by senior leadership team this year. As committed through the 2025 budget, we've embarked on identifying 34 positions to restate or repurpose to support our Build Back Better effort, and that was committed through the 2025 budget process. So leadership and the departments are reviewing vacancies and positions to repurpose towards those 35 positions, alleviating the requirement for requesting 34 additional staff. So that's work that's already underway, and that work I expect will continue into 2026 budget deliberations as well.
I appreciate that, GM, but again, thank you for that information. But I hope that, again, my initial question of how many of the 800 may not be hired up to now, you could bring that back at the subsequent meetings. Again, for part of the, and maybe the majority of this council says, Tom, we want to forge ahead to hire all 800. I may have a difference of opinion. Through you, Budget Chair Wilson, please.
Through the chair, we're happy to look at the historical information and try to identify how many of those positions were recruited and filled. I just want to highlight there's a natural cycle where people leave the organization, come back, so we can identify ultimately how many of them were filled. Some of those may be vacant today just because someone's moved on from the organization. So we can look to take that away. If I could ask for a motion, if that could be directed through a motion, and then we could track that and look to report back.
Councillor, would you like
need
to?
a motion for,
Would you like
okay.
to work on that when we
Yeah,
get to
sure, I'll work.
motions on the part of the agenda? And that way you have a little bit of time.
Yeah, thank you, Budget Chair Wilson.
You're
Yeah, a
welcome.
motion is required by the GM. Okay, I will do that. I have two more questions. Could you put me on a second time then? Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Through the chair, and just the motion allows us
To track.
for housekeeping and ensuring that we're tracking it.
Thank you. I have Councillor Francis, please.
Thank you, Budget Chair Wilson. Can you put this increase into real numbers? How much will the average homeowner be paying in 2026 if the 8.9% outlook becomes a reality?
Through the chair, I don't know that we have that. I believe that an average household is about $5,370 for 2025. So I don't know if someone can do some quick math and up in the gallery in terms of a 8.9% increase.
I see some math-oriented people doing some, I'm wondering if we could come back to that, and that way we'll allow
Sounds good. Okay.
Director Weaver to do that, and
No
then.
problem. Sounds good. So I do have a series of questions here. So the city has been using reserves to balance its budget in recent years, as has been pointed out by basically everybody here so far. What steps are being taken in the 2026 outlook to reduce our dependence on the reserves so that the taxpayers aren't continually funding these short-term fixes? And what is the dollar amount, and I hope you've got this one, of reserves being used in 2026 compared to 2025? Through you, Chair.
Sure. And through the chair, as I presented, it is a four-year strategy to reduce our reliance on reserves such that by end of 2027, we're no longer reliant on reserves with respect to those four components. 2025, we adopted a budget that had $63.3 million of reliance on reserves. 2026, we're forecasting $17 million in reliance on reserves, and then by 2027 down to $3.1 million, such that by 2028 we're no longer reliant on reserves. We have a structurally balanced budget.
I really appreciate that. That clears, it paints a much clearer picture for me in the stark difference between last year to this year to next year and beyond. So we're clearly in a slowing economy. We're driven by an affordability crisis. I know your famous comment is you're in the hands of committee as it relates to the direction you're given, and no one knows our finances better than you. You're immersed in this 365 days a year. You're probably having nightmares about our finances by now. But if General Manager Zagarek was sitting on this side of the equation, what types of strategies would you be looking at to get this budget into an affordable range for our residents, given that our dependence on reserves is now behind us? It's no longer an option. We've exhausted that strategy, and we've also have a very little support from higher levels of government. Through you, Chair.
Okay. Through the Chair. Firstly, I wish I was having nightmares. That would mean I was sleeping, but because of a bad knee, I'm not sleeping. I think what we've highlighted is a few areas of focus for the next few weeks and months as staff work through the budget and deliberate with council. The pace of investment in infrastructure, and I'm not suggesting clawing back or reducing the investment of infrastructure, but it is one of those traditional opportunities for municipalities to affect affordability. Yes, if that's a permanent reduction or a long-term reduction, there will be future costs associated with not making those investments. But given the affordability challenges, that is a traditional area for municipalities to look at. Staff will be continuing to look for efficiencies, and in the report it speaks to about $19 million in adjustments that include some efficiencies. That work will continue. We are going to something that I didn't highlight is capital savings for projects that are completed. We call them WIP savings. We are continuing that work. In 2025, that reduced the levy by 0.56%. So that's another opportunity. Councillor McMeekin made reference to revenues. One can increase revenues, user fees. We will be recommending increases to some user fees, but because of market conditions, we'll be recommending holding the line on some user fees. And sometimes it's part of another strategy beyond tax affordability, but to support the broader community in other ways. Those are examples of ways municipalities. The final one is the difficult one, is when 45% of your expenditures are employee-related costs, it's reviewing opportunities to be more efficient and potentially the opportunities to reduce service levels or adjust service levels as part of the deliberations.
That was an excellent answer, and I sincerely hope you start to feel better and recover with your knee injury there. Last question for me. It's obvious that we need to take a strong look at the staffing complement, which has exploded by approximately 800 new bureaucrats in the last 3 years and makes up a significant pressure, as your report clearly outlines and as you've outlined in my previous question. And I continue to hear from residents, they have no idea where their taxes are going. They're paying much more and they're getting absolutely nothing for it. That's a sentiment that's out there, and that's what folks are experiencing. The city automatically backfills almost every staff vacancy instead of assessing whether or not the role is still essential. My question is around the potential use of attrition as a tool, and if you could expand upon that.
Yeah. Through the chair, that is in part the work that leadership have endeavored on 2025 as it relates to, in 2025, as it relates to those 34 positions. That will be the work that the departments continue to take away leading up to the budget deliberations, looking at gapping, looking at the vacancies, and whether or not some positions are no longer required and available for other priorities. This, I'll say this is likely an exercise that will go beyond staffing. The budget process is very much, you'll see the reference to trade-offs. We may have to make trade-offs on our capital program, whether it's services. Being required to deliver a balanced budget really forces that difficult conversation around priorities and the potential need for trade-offs.
I appreciate that answer. And just back to my first question, did we get any, that was my last question. Did we get any answer, any math calculations there on what the average homeowner would be paying if we pass along an 8.9% tax increase?
Director Weaver, please.
Through the chair, Kirk Weaver, Acting Director, Financial Planning, Administration and Policy. So based on the average assessed value of a home of $387,000, an 8.9% increase would translate into an increase of approximately $479.
So did you say $479?
Correct, yeah.
I appreciate that answer. I know my residents, after 3 consecutive, nearly 6% tax increases, they cannot absorb anywhere even close to that. So we've got a lot of work to do here, and I appreciate the time, and put me back on for a second time for some comments. Thank you.
Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, and through the chair. First of all, I want to thank you, Mike, for coming to my town hall meeting, September 4th. It was well attended. People really appreciate it, and I'm so glad that we are having virtual citywide in-line engagement. People are emailing me, and they want to engage, and in November and January. So as soon as we know the date, I could put it in my newsletter, and people will engage. So thank you again for coming. My question is this. I heard you say at the beginning that we are anticipating a recession. Now, how can we help our residents with taxes that are increasing every year? If we approve even 6.9 increase, we will be accumulatively increased over the 4 year. It's over 20%. And I'm wondering, the first question is, what tools are we providing residents to navigate their budget so that they can afford the taxes? I don't know if you were there. I've had people email literally saying they cannot afford any increase. So can you give me some tools so we could help our residents in that area if there's going to be a recession?
So firstly, through the chair, it wasn't staff that are forecasting a recession. Formally, a recession is 2 consecutive periods of declining GDP, not suggesting we're not already in a recession, but I think that will be determined in the next quarter, whether we're in a recession. There just seems to be some consensus from Bank of Canada and others that we will be in a recession period. So with respect to how the municipal budget responds to the recession, I would say, firstly, we understand the affordability challenge. Councillor Pauls, I heard very clearly from I think 100 constituents or thereabouts who attended your town hall, and that was a prominent theme. The other theme that I heard through the town hall is the need for infrastructure investment and making improvements in infrastructure. That's one opportunity for the municipality to be investing in the local economy and creating economic activity. And so by clawing back relative to where we are today, so we talked a little bit about, adjusting the potential pace, but by clawing back would not necessarily help the local economy. It could negatively impact the local economy. We've made some decisions to date that impacts the 2026 budget. We made the decision staff recommended and council endorsed a temporary program for some further development charge relief. That was not to affect affordability. That was really to affect the opportunity for the local labor force and for the development community. So there's areas of investment that supports the local economy. There are programs that we provide with respect to affordability, whether it's for seniors, for low-income individuals. What I heard very clearly, Councillor Pauls, at your town hall, was an interest to increase those subsidy programs. The challenge, the rub is that to fund those requires an increase in property taxes to provide additional subsidies. So striking some sort of a balance with respect to where we prioritize subsidy and how long we provide that subsidy. And as I mentioned previously, cost containment measures, we are looking, departments are looking further beyond what's already reflected at ways of reducing the 2026 budget position going into deliberations. So those are examples. Just to the general comment with respect to services and service levels is with respect to the improvements in services, there are examples we can point to that have improved, where we've made improvements to service levels that really impacts the quality of life. And I'll point to a couple. Long-term care, the investments we made into our long-term care home and increasing the number of beds, the investments that we've made with respect to transportation and transit, those are all examples of investments that in part go towards improving the quality of life for the citizens. But again, to Councillor Pauls, I hope I've tried to provide some response to the question.
Yes, you have. That's why we need the province to help us, because there's a lot of good things we're doing, and the taxpayers cannot pay it all. So my next question, and I just have one more, is on page 7 of 20, below table 3. It talks about 3 different DC charges over $8 million. What do they consist of? I don't understand. It's 3.6 and it adds a 2.3 and 2.2. Altogether, it's over $8 million. Can you just make it clear to me what is this DC exemption consist of? Why are there 3?
Yep. Can you just reference the page number for
It's
the public?
page 7.
Thank you.
The increase in the capital levy, and it's broken down as follows. It's at the bottom, 3.6, 2.3, 2.2, DC charges.
Yeah. Through the chair. So with respect to the 3.6, and that represents about a 0.3% levy increase, what council approved was a 4-year strategy with respect to funding our DC exemptions and in part from Provincial Bill 23. So Provincial Bill 23 is no longer in effect, but we still have legacy liability DC exemptions that we have to fund. So that in part is the driving factor to the 3.6%. And with respect to the $2.3 million, 0.18%, again, the overall strategy is a 4-year strategy, and that includes some of the historically unfunded statutory DC exemptions. And then the final is $2.2 million or 0.17% for year 2 of 3 to address our discretionary, so not legislated, but the discretionary DC exemptions. So in total, I believe it's about $8 million. And this is another opportunity. So again, what council's approved is a 4-year strategy to address these liabilities. Another opportunity is to revise that 4-year strategy and extend that 4-year strategy. So that will be a consideration for staff to take away and present through the balance of our deliberations. So again, these are principally, councillor, historic development charge exemptions that were not funded, and this goes back to a decade plus.
A decade plus. And most of these DC charges were, I know one was for home, Bill Faster Home, Bill 23, but those were all nonprofit. Am I correct?
Yeah, those continue through the chair. Those continue to be obligations municipalities have to the not-for-profit sector. They are development charge exempt, but there's a suite across every sector. There are development charge exemptions and discounts for residential, for commercial, for industrial, for farm, for institutional. So every sector are eligible for some credits or exemptions. And so this is our requirement to fund those credits and exemptions and catch up with the backlog. And it's that backlog that we have some opportunity to review around the pace of funding that in light of our current current affordability challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Pauls, for your questions.
Yeah,
If
thank
you'd like
you.
to go back on, please just let us know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
We have Councillor Clark, just so folks know, Clark, Beatty, Taddison, Mayor Horvath, and Councillor Nan. Councillor Clark, please.
Good morning, Budget Chair Wilson. Thank you for the opportunity. Before I begin my questions, page 8 of 20 of the presentation, in my book, the image is cut off. So the actual chart does not extend to the end of the chart that you showed us on the screen. So we don't see the 8.9% in the document.
Can I just seek clarification so that we can all follow along? You're referencing the presentation or the report, sir?
The PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
Page 8 of 20.
Okay, thank you for that.
So through the chair, we can take that away and correct a slide. This table, if it's the table, I think, which is 8, that's captured on page 6 of 20 of the report, but we can correct the slide deck.
Yeah, it just looks like when they were planting the image in the document, somehow the border got cut off, so we don't see the whole thing, and I'd like to have it for my review. A question, so I'm trying to truly understand what's happening with our reserves. So we're now moving to a non-reliance on reserves from the, using the tax stabilization reserve?
Yeah. Through the chair, we're reducing our reliance on reserves, but not using another reserve. We have to swap it out with a sustainable source of funding. So that's what's reflected on slide 7, I believe, the pie chart that shows 1.9% impact. So as we reduce our reliance on reserve, we have to find an alternative funding source, and that's what's reflected as a levy pressure.
And so how long into the future will that 1.9% swap out be? In other words, we've spent more than we actually paid for in the budget, and now we have to catch up. The spending is if we've increased spending, say, to 25%, but we've only increased our levy by 20%, we have catch up because we are, and I don't mean, it's a catch up fiscally. We have to, if we're still spending the money. So we've decided to spend it in the first year. We increased our spending significantly, and the budget's no longer there to support it, so we have to put it on the levy. That's basically what's happening.
Through the chair, yes. So in 2024, 2025, there were a number of priorities that represented extraordinary investments, and we drew on reserves in those years. And you're seeing that a reduction on the reliance of reserves as it relates to that strategy, $29 million, which drives the 1.9%. If this were to be approved, as is, that 1.9%, if that was approved, we would have then a relatively small increase. If we're forecasting another $3 million, it'd be like 0.25% in 2027. So that 1.9% would form part of the base, and then another 0.25%, and that would then provide sustainable funding, and there would be no subsequent increases beyond 2027, and we would have a fully structurally balanced budget.
Thank you. I just heard Mr. Weaver say just a few moments ago, Chair, the average home that we calculate the average municipal tax increase on, the value is around $375,000 to $385,000, depending on the documents that I've seen. Is that correct? Is that what we're doing this year again?
Yeah, through the chair, I believe it's 386,000. If it changes, it'll change marginally higher because it's not a reassessment period. Only through reassessment periods do you see a big escalation. So this continues to be the assessed values are still based on January 1st, 2016. So that average is really reflective of now a value that's a decade old. And so short answer is yes, it's 386,000. That's an average. I understand some are higher and some are lower. And it's been in that 375, as Councillor Clark, 386 now for some time because reassessment has not been updated since 2016 to 20.
So when new houses are built, an $850,000 home, we only tax them based on $385,000 house?
No, but great question. When new homes are built, MPAC assesses them as of the value of that home, what that home would have been valued at January 1st, 2016. So they would have reflected what the market was in 2016. So if it's an $800,000 home today, it likely has an assessed value. If you think back where the market has gone since 2016, it may have a $400,000, $500,000 assessed value, again, subject to market conditions. This is one of those education exercises that will have to be undertaken for anyone who's purchased a home after 2020 or built a home, especially in the latter parts, is educating that their homes are valued as if that home was built January 1st, 2016. And when the next reassessment, depending on how it's structured, will have to educate in terms of what that valuation date is. My earlier comment is, had the province picked a valuation date of 2021 or 22 when the residential market was at its peak and then had a subsequent reassessment declining, we would be explaining to residents, oh, your property value went way up, now it's coming way down. It's all revenue neutral to municipality. This is the key message. Irrespective where assessments go, when values go up, it's not a revenue benefit to municipality. When the price, I'm sorry for the length of this response, but when the price of cars go up, when the price of homes go up, senior levels of government benefit from that, from the inflation through the consumptive taxes, HST. Cities do not benefit at all when property values go up because we have to offset that benefit by reducing the tax rate. And I apologize for the length of that response.
Thank you. Time for a supplemental on that?
On that, I'll allow it, and then if you'd like to go.
Yes, please. And shorter answers next time. I'm teasing. So help me and my residents understand this. Taxes went up 5.8% last year, roughly. Why did many of my residents see tax increases of 10 to 12%?
So through the chair, in part, there could have been changes to the property that MPAC would have captured. That's one opportunity. I'm not suggesting majority of the cases. In some cases, if you purchased a home and you could have lived in that home for 2 years, and MPAC has up to 24 months before they come back and do a final assessment of that home. And that final assessment could represent a big increase. And so they're attributing it to the tax increase, but what's really driving that is there was a preliminary assessment that the tax rate was based on, and then MPAC did a final assessment that more truly reflected the value again to January 1st. So that's another opportunity. The other opportunity would be, the other factor, but it's a lesser one, is area rating and changes of area rating. But Councillor, again, happy to take that offline if there's specific, for any councillor, if there's specific properties, we're happy to review in detail the contributing factors, but it's not municipal property taxes that would be the driving force. There would have to have been a change in the assessed value, and we can work with MPAC as to what drove that change.
I'd appreciate that because it was a lot of people in my ward, not just a couple. I mean, lots. The folks were calling me regularly saying their taxes had gone up 10%. How is that possible? It's a mistake. And we submit it to taxation and taxing. No, it's not a mistake. That's their increase.
And I'm stuck because we told everyone it was 5.8%, but they're paying 10, and it's not area rating. Area rating is a very tiny amount these days.
So through the chair, always happy to help you get unstuck by providing you the details, what's happening in pockets within your wards. And it may have been an MPAC exercise, so we're happy to try to unpack that for you.
Thank you. Councillor Beatty, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, and thank you for a lot of the questions around the table so far. I think it's been very instructive and informative. But I do want to build off of the same line of questioning coming from my colleague from Ward 9. Just in terms of the assessed value that we were discussing, my colleague from Ward 5 got an answer, I think, from Director Weaver that the average increase on a assessed value of 386,000 was in the 400s, but I've forgotten the specificity of that number. Wonder if I could just get it restated.
Director Weaver, when you are able to.
Through the chair, it was 479.
479, thank you. I'm just trying to understand then, 386, I fully understand and comprehend the 2016 impact situation that we're in. Bulk of the homes in Ward 10, unfortunately, are well above that assessed value, getting into the 7s and 8s. Is there a direct correlation in terms of, do you simply double the dollar figure if the assessed value of the home is double of what the average is? Does it just go from 479 to 916 or whatever it is? My math's not so good. Or is there a different calculation on how we produce those numbers? I just want to be able to articulate that to my residents authentically.
Through the chair, it is as the councillor described. It's really a function. Your tax burn is a function of your assessed value tax rate. Tax rate doesn't change. Property to property, exclusive of some area rating impacts across the municipality. So whatever your assessed value is, you apply the tax rate. So if you're assessed at 386,000, it's what Acting Director Weaver conveyed. If you're assessed at double that, your tax increase would be double that amount.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. So it is just as simplistic as if you double the average, it's double the dollar figure. Yes. Okay, thank you for that. Follow-up question then, actually it's unrelated, sorry. I shouldn't say it's a follow-up question, new line of question. Every year we end up discussing what a 1% reduction to the proposed levy increase would be and what the corresponding dollar value is. And forgive me if it's already been stated. It seems to ebb and flow a little bit every year. I know when we started it was closer to 11 million per 1%. I think last year it was closer to 12 million per 1%. What is that target number right now that we would be looking at for each 1% reduction? And apologies again, it's already been stated.
No. Through the chair, I don't believe I've referenced it this morning. It's $13 million, and it's really a reflection of the net levy. So each year, as the net levy increases, the amount of funds that 1% generates increases as well.
Okay, $13 million per 1% decrease. Does that number change, GM, whether we're talking about the 8.9% starting, or if we were to come down and view it from the 6.6% fallback position, if we were trying to go, doesn't matter where we start, the numbers are the same, 13 million per 1%.
Yeah, through the chair, it doesn't matter where we start as relates to 2026, it matters where we ended as it relates to 2025.
Okay, I appreciate that. Final question through the chair. It's actually going back to the city manager made a comment, and Marnie, sorry to put you on the spot. In terms of meetings for discussions in our communities as it pertains to the budget process and collecting feedback and engagement, I thought I heard you say a meeting planned in every ward. And okay, I'm just trying to understand because you said there's some details coming, and some of us are planning in-ward conversations with our constituents. Don't want to confuse or double up processes, muddy the waters in terms of what's doing who and who's doing what. If you could just give a tiny bit more clarification, or if you simply just want to say more's coming on Monday, that's fine too. just let me know what the overarching communication strategy and engagement strategy for our communities are, and how we can support or back off in terms of individual ward councillors doing engagement pieces in their communities.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I'll give you an overarching, but then you'll receive more detailed communication either tomorrow or Monday. There will be several in-person meetings across the city. I think it's 6, if I'm recalling correctly, and that will cover off the city, but obviously then with 6, it'll be covering off multiple wards at one time. Councillors will be invited to those, and if that doesn't work, there will be alternatives that they can attend. There will also be a virtual session, which will be citywide since it's virtual. There will be an online survey, and there will be the balancing act tool. We'll continue with delegations as we have in the past to allow the public to come here as well. And then following that, we can also work with individual council members once we have the results of the overall engagement.
Okay, it was mostly, thank you for the answer, it was mostly the in-person engagement portion. You said 6 meetings, clustering different words together. Very interested in getting that information as quick as possible, just so that we can make sure we're not doubling our efforts or interfering in each other's engagement pieces. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taddison.
Thanks, GM Zagaric, for your high-level budget presentation today. I just wanted to acknowledge that I think we're all committed to finding efficiencies. I wanted to delve back into the past a bit, and this is just my recollection from last year's budget process. I suggested we drop contingencies in some 2025 Public Works capital project fundings from 12 to 10%. I think you remember it. Basically, for Public Works to work with 2% less right off the top. Director Weaver's team actually found 40-some projects that met the criteria and stated that this would have generated about $850K in savings off the levy. However, at that time, council seemed reluctant to go forward with that full-scale assertive right-sizing contingency motion due to unknowns like tariffs, inflation, with materials and labor cost worries. So we changed the motion and modified it to become a pilot project where PW staff were going to choose 8 to 10 capital projects across their department and work with a reduced contingency of 2%. I believe staff was directed to report back to the Budget Committee in 2026 to see if that was a viable way to reduce the levy. I don't see that information reflected in your presentation today, and I'm just wondering where staff are on that and if my recollections are correct or inaccurate. Thank you.
Through the chair, I know that Corporate Services through Acting Director Weaver has been following up with Public Works through Acting GM Kennedy. So I don't know the timing for that report back. I know that it is on the roadmap for the direction with respect to the 2026 budget process, but I don't know the specific timing for it. Again, it wouldn't reflect part of the overview, pending the outcome of that report.
Okay, thanks for that. Just as long as I know that it's on the go, that's satisfying to me. One more question. Just a couple of years back, I'll call it the bus barn, required significant increases in investment from the city to take the budget basically over $300 million. Now, some of those costs that were anticipated at that time, I believe would have eased with better supply for materials and labor shortages that were at the time have now been corrected. Are there any savings to be realized there that could be directed towards the 2026 budget?
Through the chair, that'll form part of our work in the coming weeks and months. As we look at previously approved capital projects, you may recall that the maintenance storage facility was one of those projects that had a significant increase coming out of the pandemic. We'll be working with our Public Works colleagues to see whether or not there's any available funding in that project, and we'll capture that through a potential WIP adjustment. So that's an exercise we do each and every year. Last year, it materialized into a 0.56 reduction to our levy position, and that will be one of the projects we'll look at as well. Typically, we look at closed projects, but if it's a large project that we can make some preliminary recommendations to appropriate some surplus, that'll form part of our reporting back.
Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Thank you, GM.
Thank you. Mayor Horvath, please.
Thanks very much, Chair Wilson. Just a couple of follow-ups from some of the things that have been raised already. One is there's a couple of councillors that mentioned the piece around the 8.9 and what that turns into in terms of dollars. But I don't know that we got the 6.6 and what that translated into dollars. And so that information's out there. It'd be probably helpful for councillors to get a sense. I think Councillor Beattie was the most recent councillor to raise that issue. So we'll give you a minute or two to find that out, unless it's available immediately. And then I have a few other just small ones like this that are following up on what some of the councillors have identified. The other one is there's the issue around possible deferral or, spreading out of capital projects in terms of the financing because they're not imminent. And they don't look like they're going to be needing to be financed right away. So I just want to get some understanding of a couple of things there. If we do that, if we make those changes, does that also then impact will that impact reductions in the operating cost of capital? So kind of following on a little bit of what Councillor Jackson was raising, there's operating costs of capital embedded in this budget. If we're moving some of that capital out because it's not imminent or it doesn't look like it needs to be financed right away, how does that impact the operating costs of capital?
Yeah.
And FTEs included.
Through the chair, I'll let staff try to answer the question regarding, I think, the 6.6 tax rate scenario and what that would represent in terms of dollar value. With respect to the deferral of programs, that will be something we report back on I think it'll principally affect our water budget for 2026. If there was some phase-in of staff with respect to that project starting in 2026, that may be deferred out to 2027. So we'll work with Hamilton Water to better understand whether or not there's an impact. With respect to what's reflected before committee today, again, we'll review the timing of those projects. If they are not coming online in 2026, we'll recommend deferring those to 2027. But by deferring some of the forecasted capital investment for 2026, it would likely alleviate the operating impacts in future years. So these would be new projects then that would not require operating impacts in 2027 or 2028. So more of an opportunity to reduce the potential tax impact of future years' operating impacts if projects are being pushed out or deferred.
Okay. I'll follow up offline with you on that one at another time. Another question, though, then, in that kind of sphere, if you will, is the extent to which any of these kinds of initiatives or opportunities, how does that impact our asset management? Will you be able to identify, should some of these recommendations or motions come forward, will you be able to identify then the impacts on the asset management plan, as well as the $5.2 billion infrastructure deficit that we now carry?
Yeah. Through the chair, we would look to work with our asset management group to reflect if there's an adjustment in our financing strategy, how that will be reflected in those future asset management plans. They currently assume our current financing strategy, and so if that financing strategy changes, we would work with our asset management group to capture and reflect that. I think, reasonably speaking, it would potentially represent a slight increase in the infrastructure gap in the immediate few years, assuming that this isn't a permanent adjustment we're making. It's a short-term deferral because of the current circumstances around affordability.
Thank you. If I can continue, Chair Wilson, I guess that leads me to the question about, do we also then calculate the likely inflationary costs of the deferral of capital in those calculations?
Through the chair, the asset management group would, and what we would work with the departments, and if there's any short-term operating impacts by deferring capital. But again, it may still represent an increase, overall increase, but not at the pace currently assumed.
Okay, appreciate that. Don't know if we have that response yet on the 6.6.
Yes, we do. Director Weaver.
Through the chair, a 6.6% residential tax increase would translate into an increase of approximately $353.
Thank you. Is my time up? I'm
Nope,
still good?
you still have time.
Okay,
One
so
more
then,
question.
okay, I'll just, I'll see if there's others, but there's the other one I wanted to just kind of more comment on was the questions that were about how do we, should it be tough financial times? How do we support our residents if we're into a recession? What do we have to be careful of in terms of this conversation about capital works and projects that keep people working? And just to share that this is a conversation that we had at AMO with the parliamentary assistant to the finance minister, flagging that governments, certainly provincial and federal, they're talking about it all the time, is the infrastructure investments. A big part of that is to keep people working. And so that's, I just want to kind of make sure that folks around this table know that that's a conversation that we did have with the minister. And she was the parliamentary assistant, she was very interested to know, which our city manager provided that information, that in fact we are in a position where there are capital projects that we can keep people working with, fairly quickly. There are things that are on our docket and ready to go to keep people working. I think we need to keep that in mind too. Thank you.
Councillor Nan.
Thank you, Budget Chair, and thank you, GM Zagaric, for the overview. Most of my questions have been asked, so now I'm just clarifying a couple of things that I heard, if I could. GM Zagaric, you had mentioned the forecasted surplus at 14.5. There's still work to do between now and the future report, clarifying what that final number is going to be. But did you respond to one of my colleagues saying that it's a standard practice in your budgeting process that you apply the surplus to the 2026 tax levy impact without direction, or do you require direction? And then the B part of that question is, will it be applied towards tax levy impact, or will it be applied towards what we're trying to achieve with our reserve offsets?
So through the chair, first off, any strategy has to be approved by council. Staff will make a recommendation with respect to, and past practice has been to use a portion of the capital financing surplus to apply against the capital levy impact in the upcoming year. So that was a past practice, and that would have to be approved by council through the budget process.
And through you, is that different than the works in progress saving?
Through the chair, yes. The works in progress is over and above.
Okay. And so I have it nice and clear. Staff would need direction to apply the strategy of using our 2025 surpluses, or a portion of it, in order to offset and reduce the 2026 tax levy impact. Sorry, I can't get my words out today, still recovering. And two, same would be direction required for works in progress savings.
So through the chair, on the first item, the potential application of surplus to our capital financing strategy, I would say staff do not need direction because it's past practice that we present that to council for consideration. With respect to the review of capital projects with the objective of finding savings to reduce, that's work that's underway, but if it's the will of council to direct that work, to Councillor Francis's earlier comment, I'm in the hands of council as to whether or not you wish to direct.
Got it. And the capital works projects savings, that is the same as the works in progress, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. And that was my only clarifying question remaining. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other first-time speakers before I move to second time? Seeing none, Councillor Spatafora, you're up.
Thank you, Budget Chair. GM Zagaric, a few more questions on the report, and then I have some questions for the city manager. So, two questions. One on page 12, you show a savings from the vacant unit tax. Are we getting something that's showing us how much money's been collected to date through the vacant unit tax? I know I'm seeing some emails flying around from residents that I guess are going through appeals and now they're not getting charged the VUT tax because they live in their house, they didn't do the declaration. So are we getting that number or do we know? I'm just trying to correlate with the $700,000.
Yeah. So through the chair, there is a comprehensive report that I know is drafted. I expect I will review it very shortly, and I'm assuming it will come before council with a comprehensive reporting in terms of our first year results. And what we're currently reflecting is a surplus of approximately $700,000 based on our preliminary estimates for 2025 that then would go towards the previous direction towards our housing strategy.
And so that report will have actuals, like dollars collected?
Yeah, through the chair,
Okay.
it will provide the number of declarations of vacant properties. So that's where property owners declared the property vacant and the corresponding revenue. It will provide some indication of the properties that are still outstanding, some range in terms of what may be vacant and what may not be, given that we are asking for approval to amend the bylaw to extend the appeal process. And so as we, in the first year, as we give property owners extended opportunity to meet their obligations.
Perfect. Last question for you, Jim, then I'll leave you alone. I just need confirmation on business cases. So when I look through the business case, I just need a yes or no answer if you know the answer. The business cases, when I went through them, they look like they add up to about 49 FTEs. Is that true? Yes or no, please?
Through the chair, I'm not aware. I'm seeing staff shake their head confirming that number, yes.
So 49. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate all your answers and your patience with me today and for the next few months. I'm going to move, Budget Chair. I just got a couple questions for the city manager, if that's okay.
Councillor, I am wondering if I can make this suggestion. The city manager is she's presently at a United Way function just outside the building. So she's on her way back. And I know you see the importance of all of these things.
Yep.
If I could ask you, if I could recognize you when she gets back in, and then you can ask your questions then.
Yes, the only thing I will say, I know there's some speakers that are on for a second time that'll tie into what I was going to ask the city manager about motions that I brought forward previously. I know Councillor Jackson was asked to bring a motion forward. I know there's other people talking about capital whip. That's the importance of my questions in regard to the motions, because a lot of the conversation we're having, it's all work that should have been done or should be in progress, like Councillor Jackson's questions that were in my vacancy motion. So I'll wait for the city manager to come back, but please, when she does come back, I'd like to ask her some questions on those motions and why the direction wasn't followed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through
Jim,
the chair,
Garrett, did you wish to?
I can provide some updates on,
Okay,
on two
thank
of
you.
those items. With respect to the WIP analysis, that work is underway. So that direction is being followed. With respect to the reporting regarding vacancies and the time of vacancies, how long those positions, that work is underway as well. So I just don't want to leave committee with the impression that those are not being acted upon. I don't know the exact timing for those reports, but those reports would form part of our reporting back through this budget process.
I appreciate I didn't want to have you have to answer the question, but I appreciate you giving that feedback. Just a couple things. Chair Wilson, my motion, which passed 13-0 on the capital whip, had a date of end of August in it. Would have been very helpful for us as a committee, I think, to have that here, or at least a heads up as to why we weren't able to provide that information in time. Again, it was a motion. This isn't Councillor Spatafor saying you have to do this. These are motions passed at committee, approved at council. And that's why I wanted to ask the city manager, because I feel like, I don't know, maybe they're not important, or maybe that's not the case, but it comes across to me like the motions don't matter. I had a hiring freeze motion. It was passed at committee and at council. And I look in here and I'm trying to be nice because my parents told me yesterday to be nice. So I'm trying to be nice, but I passed the hiring freeze motion, budget chair, and I'm looking at business cases, got 49 FTEs. So do my motions, are they out of order? Are they not applicable? Is there something wrong with my motions? Capital whip, end of August, not here. Hiring freeze, and then staff come forward and say we want 49 new FTEs. The direction was approved by everybody here. Maybe not everybody, but it passed with the majority. No more FTEs for 2026. I get a report, we got 49 new FTEs coming in 2026 that staff are asking for. So my direction out the door, their direction in the report. It's frustrating. Then a vacancy report, which is so tied into what we're doing here, we don't have any forthcoming. I don't know. It's frustrating, and I apologize.
So through the chair, if I can just provide confirmation that staff are acting on those motions. And again, I know that both of those motions are in progress, and I apologize if we've missed the end of August timeline. I know we've had some competing pressures, including the reports that are before committee today, and I can take that away and see what the potential timing is on the WIP analysis.
I appreciate that, GM, but I still want to discuss it with the city manager when she's back, if that's okay. Thank you.
With respect to the 49 FTEs reflected business cases, this is a starting point. So these are what the departments have put forward. Some of these 49 fall within the parameters of the motion. So the motion permitted some carve-outs in terms of what can come forward. So some of these will be related to, for instance, first responders that I believe were a carve-out. But some of these will be reviewed by senior leadership team in case there is a health or safety or other requirement. Not suggesting that they will ultimately come forward, but I just want to reassure that we are listening and we've heard the councillors. And again, this is just a starting point with respect to the business cases.
With all due respect, Jim, I appreciate that. The only number of FTEs in this report should have been the number that were outlined that the motion allowed to be presented. No staff member, and I understand we're reviewing them, but every staff member, especially at the director level, manager level, unless they missed the motion, knew the motion was no more FTEs unless it's fire, paramedics, long-term care. Like, it shouldn't happen. You're basically saying we don't care what the motion said. We're still bringing them forward because we believe we know better and we need more FTEs. To me, it's unacceptable. And whatever staff members brought that forward, have that conversation. And it's not your conversation. The city manager needs to have that conversation. Direction was passed at committee, passed at council. Those FTEs should not be in this report because there's direction not to do it. So again, not your conversation to have. That's why I wanted to direct the questions to the city manager, because I know that's something she would take on. So thank you.
Thank you. I would like to recognize GM Mader, who may be able to also help inform this matter. Thank you.
Through the chair, Grace Mader, General Manager, Healthy and Safe Communities, through to Councillor Spatafor. I can confirm, Councillor, that of those 49, 20 of them are related to paramedics. So I can say that for sure, certainty right off the top. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Jackson, please.
So GM Zagaric, I listened carefully and you've confused me because an hour ago, getting on a second-time speakers list, Budget Chair Wilson, one of the things was, Councillor Jackson, I need a motion. So I prepared this motion, drafted it with the help of LC Bates and Director Weaver, that staff be directed to report back during the 2026 budget process about how many of the new FTEs, approximately 800, approved during this term of council have actually been hired to date. I just heard you say to Councillor Spatafora, Councillor, we're working on it. We got your motion from June 11th. We're already working on it. Why did you need mine? But if you still need mine, I've put some pen to it, and I'd love to introduce it if I could get a seconder. Could you clarify, please? Because honestly, you confused me, and if it's my simple mind, I apologize.
Yeah. Through the chair, it's my simple mind. So with respect to recollection, I don't recall whether Councillor Spatafora's motion was around vacancies and the aging of vacancies versus how many of the previously approved positions over the last 3 years have gone through a recruitment process and are currently filled. So I apologize. I can't recall specifically what the previous direction was in detail and whether it captured what you are asking, Councillor Jackson, which is of the previously approved increases in staffing over, I'm assuming, last 3 years, how many of those have gone through a recruitment process and we have successfully recruited for? So again, I just can't recall the specifics of the earlier motion and assumed it wasn't part of the earlier motion, but if I'm wrong, then I'll rely on the clerk just to correct that your motion's no longer required.
Jim Zegeric, I was just trying to avoid duplication, that's all. But I'm more than happy to put this forward, Budget Chair Wilson, if I can get a seconder for it, please. Councillor Clark? Okay, thank you. So why don't we go ahead, Elsie McCray, let's play it safe. If I could, Budget Chair Wilson, let's play it safe given the delineation GM Zegeric has just enunciated. Let me do my motion to play it safe, which captures what I am focusing and targeting on. So I'll repeat it. If I may right now or not yet?
I think we know what's coming, but if you wouldn't mind holding it till we get to motions.
Perfect.
Thank you, sir.
And can I at least educate my colleagues on a second motion that I could do later as well? Or should I hold off on that too?
Would you mind holding off on that too?
All right. Then I just have one last comment, please, at this time. So put me down, please, for a third time. So, Mayor Horvath, I listened to you very carefully a couple of hours ago in saying that hearing your collaboration and cooperation for the 2026 budget, which I'm very, very relieved and grateful for. And so I guess all I'm saying is being stung in the last 12 months when the city solicitor told me during the water rate budget approval last December, Councillor Jackson, you can passively adopt it. I wrote those words down in memoriam, passively adopted only. And then this past 25 budget in February, in spite of amendments, Mayor Horvath, in her wisdom, approved the budget. So I guess with all the work we're going to do in the next few months, I'm just trusting, believing my mayor that we're going to have the more collaboration, because if the SMP, the senior, the super mayor powers, at some point in time will come into play, I'd rather know 6 months in advance than 6 months later. That's my only plea and comment. Thanks, Budget Chair Wilson. Thank you.
I think Mayor Horvath is indicating a
Yeah,
desire to speak.
just to be, thank you, I appreciate that. No, and I appreciate the question, and yes, in fact, the putting forward the current municipal act and what the requirements are and the timelines very, very soon is definitely on the agenda. Try to kind of get it ready for this particular meeting, knowing that people need it and want it and deserve it. But it's very imminent, so that you'll see all the timelines of the requirements of the municipal act.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark. Councillor Francis has taken himself off. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Budget Chair. I'd like to ask a question about gapping. Is gapping the term that is used to represent FTEs that have been budgeted for but are not currently employed? Is that a fair description?
Through the chair, yes, I'll expand. It represents budgeted positions and their associated dollars And where there is a vacancy, either because of a maternity leave, short-term leave, long-term leave, someone's just chosen to leave the organization, it reflects the savings relative to the assumption that those positions would be filled for the full calendar year.
And so when that gapping occurs in the departments, is the manager, director, or general manager responsible to review the requirements for that particular position as to whether or not it will continue to be funded? Or they don't need it anymore and they let central management know and someone either can pick up that gapping or we take it out of the budget?
Through the chair, short answer is yes, that exercise does occur, and it's currently occurring as it relates to the 34 FTEs that we are working towards identifying through those gappings or those opportunities from the approved complement in 2025. So short answer is yes. Departments are currently doing that to try to realize 34 positions that we committed to for 2024, and then 2025, and then you would have seen in the variance report, we budget for gapping as well to reduce our levy position.
Thank you. The water rate budget, I believe if I can ask a question about that also. Thank you. I believe council or the mayor's last budget indicated 10% a year for 10 years. Now, when I'm looking at that budget, and I get that we're trying to increase capacity for water, and all of that is important, but it's compounded over 10 years. It's not just 10% each year, it's 10% and then 10% of that 10% and on until you get a significant figure. Do we include that compounding in the budget? Is it calculated and included in the budget?
Yeah, through the chair it is. And so each year, as the base increases, that 10% will generate a higher dollar value. The opportunity is for us to potentially deviate from the 10% each year over 10 years, and that will be something that staff will take away and look to see if there's alternative scenarios where we would continue to support the overall scope of the capital program, but the potential timing in light of the affordability challenges.
Yeah, the difference between what we anticipated the cost of the plant improvements and what they actually end up being can be quite different. And so it's important that we have that opportunity to review that number and tweak it. I'm still a little bit confused. And it's about the budget process and the policy. So Mayor Horvath said at the beginning of the meeting that this is not her budget, that this is our budget. But what I'm seeing is that councillors still don't have a vote on the budget. We simply receive information. We don't get to approve the budget. Well, I'm asking the question, so there's no need for a point of order. You're going to get an opportunity to speak to it.
Chair, I have a point of order around what the characterization of what I said at the beginning, which wasn't that it's our budget, insofar as this particular document that's ahead of us is the beginning of the budget. And yes, I do want to say that at the end of the day, the budget by legislation is articulated in a certain way, and it's all of our responsibility to get us to that budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And the point that this is not a budget, it's an outlook, but please.
Well, the point is that the elected members on this table don't get to vote yes or no on a budget. And so it's not this chamber's budget, it's the mayor's budget. We get to provide input, the mayor gets to weigh it with the senior leadership team and then make a determination as to what the budget is. So it's important that the residents understand that. You know, I still find it frustrating because councillors don't have the information that they need to make real serious changes to the budget. It's a much more globalized approach than it was in the past. And I just have to show you the difference in the budget books when I did get them and what we have now. So it's very challenging, you know, and we don't have the opportunity to make significant changes. We used to have the opportunity to say, staff, we like a 2% budget or 3% budget, do it. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that the city manager takes the direction and they go and do it. It's upended when you say, oh, councillor, you have to tell me where to cut. What? No corporation does that. When I was at Queen's Park, we didn't do it. Each minister had to cut the budget by 5%. Carney said 15%. And they give the direction, and the bureaucrats come back with that. That's not happening. So I continue to be frustrated. I appreciate you letting me diplomatically vent my spleen, if you will. But as far as I know, nothing has changed. We don't have a vote on the budget. We can move a motion to overturn the budget, and if you have 2/3 vote, that can count. But in reality, if you don't have 2/3, it only takes 1/3 of the councillors and the mayor to move this budget.
And my point of seeking to not dismiss your remarks, but to clarify for the public, is that what is being discussed today is not the budget.
Then what are we doing here?
We are receiving
The budget outlook,
An
we're
outlook.
discussing the budget. This whole process for the next 3 months is about the budget.
respectfully. What we are doing today is we are receiving from staff an outlook and the macro and micro forces that they believe at this point in time are affecting an outlook. They've also identified for us those things that they are still working on that will further inform that end product, that budget, which will be the starting point for us once we have all that information at hand. That's all I'm saying. I'm not seeking to dismiss or redefine the budget process as set out in regulation by the Government of Ontario. I am just trying, for reasons of clarity, saying that this is not the budget, which I understand we are getting sometime in December, I hope. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? I just want to remind folks also, these are very important discussions. We also have a standing committee meeting this afternoon at 1:30 on one of those big items. And we have another item to get through. So I don't have any further speakers. Next on the agenda,
So just to the chair, just if we could have a vote, show of hands. We have a mover and seconder with it on the floor, but if we could just receive the presentation and the report.
sorry, thank you. I will hold that. I didn't realize that the city manager had re-entered the chamber. My apologies to Elsie McCrae. City manager, I understand you were at a charitable event, a charity event. There was a question asked by Councillor Spatafora. I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'd like to recognize him now, and he can pose those questions to you. Councillor Spatafora.
Thank you, Budget Chair and City Manager. I'll give you a bit of context so you can, so basically I'm asking the question around some motions that I've brought forward. And as the city manager who manages all employees, I'm looking for some help. I don't know, some answers, some explanations. So, and I think it's important because I think when motions are passed by committee and then approved by council, we need to ensure that staff is following through on that direction. And if there's an issue why we can't or why we shouldn't or why we wouldn't, it needs to be communicated, not just to me, just because they're my motions, but everyone, because everyone voted on it. And some of these motions, I believe like the first one I'm going to talk about was 13-0. So I moved a motion, I believe it was in May or June, about capital WIP. And in the motion, which was approved 13-0, it asked for a report back from staff to this body by the end of August. Now, I didn't receive anything. I don't think anybody else did, but we're here at a budget outlook, which, you know, to me is the start of the budget process. It is a budget. It has a percentage to it. That report would have provided, I think, some much needed information. I think Councillor Nan talked about WIP. I talked about WIP. I think there was a handful of people around here that talked about capital WIP. And if the motion was followed through by staff and presented at the end of August, or here, everybody would have that information because everybody approved that motion. So that's one. Business cases are showing 49 FTEs in this budget. Again, I don't know, I don't think it was unanimous, but the motion passed at committee and council about a hiring freeze. So why would anyone bring new FTEs forward if the direction that was passed says no new FTEs? Unless all 49, and GM Mater said 20 of them are paramedics. So I guess we're down to less than 49. And then a vacancy motion that I also brought forward that was supported by committee and council and would be super important for this discussion. So I'm a little bit frustrated that a motion with a deadline in it was missed and there was no communication. A hiring freeze motion was passed and there's still FTEs coming forward. And then the vacancy motion, which was talked about a lot today, and that I don't know where that is. I know GM Zagaric said the work is ongoing, but we don't have, I guess, a timeline as to when that's coming. So hoping for something from you as the leader of all of our staff. Where do we go from here?
Through you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. So first, let me acknowledge the frustration around that and just apologize that some of the motions have not yet been responded to. And it is important information, and it is important to us that we respond to you promptly and also accurately. So I think one of the misses is not communicating in advance that the response to the motions would be delayed. So I will take that away and see how we can be more effective in that. Secondarily, we need to make sure that we're responding to the inquiries. So for the first item regarding, sorry, I've jotted them down, and the WIP, thank you. So in regards to the WIP, the team is working on that and they are slating it for October. They have been, like the other ones, balancing it with some competing demands. One, getting the budget outlook ready to the financial system implementation. But all of this information is important. So I'm not trying to diminish this. I'm trying to give an explanation for it and acknowledge that we will ensure that a response is brought forward. I continue. In terms of the hiring freeze question, with regards to that, the budget outlook is a starting point. So none of this has yet been vetted through SLT. And so we're presenting the information that we had and have had as part of the multi-year plan. And so we're showing you so that you have an awareness of where we were sitting and where we're at. And then we have to come back with the cuts and the follow through on the motions. But we also need to make sure that there's an awareness of what the commitments had been or where we were sitting so that council can make an informed decision point. And that is similar with the vacancies. So what I can commit to you is that a response will be brought forward. We will do better at communicating when there is a delay in terms of the gaps. And we want to make sure that you have the accurate information that you need to consider the budget.
Is it okay? Thank you. Thank you, City Manager. I appreciate that. And a couple things for me to clarify. I'm not looking for a response to me. These were not Councillor Spatafora only motions. These were motions that I brought forward, seconded by someone else and approved by other people around this table. So that communication's for all of the horseshoe, not just just me. So at the end of the day, when I think, and again, maybe I'm wrong, and that's when you weren't here, I made these comments. I don't know if something's changed, but when direction's given and past that committee and council, that direction, as far as I'm concerned, has to be followed. So at the end of the day, the fact that it's not vetted by SLT and yourself, I understand that. Every director and manager in this corporation should know that when a hiring freeze motion's passed by council, they should know not to bring one forward. They shouldn't be thinking about one. They shouldn't be talking about one. They shouldn't be saying, I need 35 FTs unless they're a paramedic, long-term care, or any of the other exemptions that were in the motion that this entire group passed. So again, I appreciate the latitude, Budget Chair. I think, you know, we talked about accountability a lot. I've talked about it. I'll get held accountable. Staff needs to be held accountable. The motion said end of August 2025, capital WIP was coming. It's not here. It's unacceptable when we're talking about a $2.5 billion budget for those things to happen. Because I get held accountable around here when I talk too much or I say things I shouldn't say. People call me out. So I'm calling staff out. This is extremely important to our residents. Our residents are expecting us to do as much work as possible to try to lower the impact. The mayor's having sessions to meet with people, to have those discussions, because she understands the importance. Staff better get on board and understand the importance of this budget. Understand how more difficult this budget is than any of the other three. They're all important, but this one here is extremely important. And not because it's going into an election year. It's because things are worse today than they were last year and the year before that. So missing direction, not getting back in time, not communicating it's not acceptable. We can't allow that because it's not acceptable to our residents, and I'm not going to allow it here. If I'm going to be the only one that's got to call it out, that's fine. But at the end of the day, direction needs to be followed. Just like I have to follow rules, staff needs to follow rules. We hired 800 people, utilize some of them. Utilize some of your vacancies. But at the end of the day, missing stuff because we have competing priorities when we've hired 800 people, it's not an acceptable answer for me. We got to do better for our residents when we're going to start asking for 7 and 8% on property taxes. Thank you.
Councillor Kassar, were you on the list? Beg your pardon. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can offer some clarity here. I thought maybe it would have come up through discussion, but regarding the FTE motion, what I'm reading what the motion was on the agenda, it was that council requests the mayor to include the 2026 budget directive, or in the 2026 budget directive, a requirement that no additional FTE positions be added, right? So that was a request from council to the mayor to include in the direction to the budget to staff, which actually hasn't happened yet. As you pointed out, Chair, this is a budget outlook. So staff have not received that direction from the mayor to not include FTE. So I think maybe that's the difference here, is staff are doing what they normally do in an outlook and have not received the direction from the mayor. Therefore, I think it's appropriate what they've done. So I thought that clarity is important because that's not how the motion was presented in the last few minutes.
I appreciate the clarity.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Kassar. Do you have any further comments? Okay. Councillor Spatafora, did you wish to be recognized as does
I do,
the mayor?
please, Budget Chair.
Please.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarity from Councillor Kassar. Again, I'm a lot more smarter people around the table, so I'm glad he pointed that out. I guess then my bigger concern would be, we got finance staff working on a budget outlook and a budget, and then they're going to do all this work and then get possibly a completely different direction from the mayor. So finance staff is doing all this work to bring forward a budget outlook, and then we'll get a separate directive that they need to follow from the mayor. That's very efficient.
Okay, folks. Mayor Horvath, please, did you?
Sure. So just as a reminder, the directive is something that I put together as required by legislation. That's why I've asked members to have conversations with me about what they want to see in that directive, how they want to see the budget go. That's why we're having this conversation as our initial look at the outlook. That's why we're doing public meetings in 6 different areas of the city to get input from the folks who this budget is going to impact the most, which is the residents of this city. That's why we have the online tool. That's why we're doing an online engagement as well for accessibility for folks. And all of those things are things that, including motions in terms of more formal processes, in terms of what folks want me to consider. One was just circulated as we're in this meeting, and that's the language. As we all know, it happened last year as well, granted in a very fraught way, because we were going through a process that was one that we were learning as we went. And now this is the way it works. And so I'm grateful for this conversations that we're having. I'm looking forward to the conversations that we're going to be having. And there will be a directive that is put together as I consider all of these inputs. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers. So I believe Elsie McRae, did we have a mover and a seconder for both? Yeah. Okay. And we have to exercise that now on an electronic vote? Show of hands, beg your pardon. Thank you. To receive, please, yea or nay? Majority of hands are up. I'm going to call it yea. Okay. On to the next item on our agenda, which is 7.2. Impacts of an inflationary budget increase 2.5% for 2026. If I can have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Beattie. Are there any questions coming from this information, please? I'll recognize Councillor Clark.
I keep wanting to call you deputy mayor and give you that promotion, but I'm not sure you want to have all that. Yeah, right. It comes with so much more cash. So first, I want to thank our staff for going through this process so that we can understand what, for all intents and purposes, would be an inflationary budget. When we're talking 2.5%, that's really what we should have been looking at. I'm a little bit frustrated because we are going through many hoops. Speaking to councillors, I don't agree with, I think we should be having the discussions in public. I made that clear to the mayor. I think if we're going to have engagement in the way we are proposing, and I've got a finance budget meeting, town hall coming up beginning of December 3rd at 6 o'clock at Winterberry Salvation Army Church, which is for the residents to speak up. But I can tell you what I am hearing overwhelmingly were residents supporting this type of budget process. Find the savings. Don't keep spending. We can't afford it. And it's frustrating for me, year after year, we have surpluses, and a surplus means that we have overtaxed. We've taxed people more than we needed the money, so that's our surplus. And I don't believe for a moment that we're headed into a recession. I believe, and I've said this many times in this chamber, we are in a recession. Technically, we're in a recession. The big banks haven't said that yet. And we're seeing it in Hamilton. The layoffs are getting to be significant. And meeting with my residents, they show me their tax bills. They show me their budget. They're on fixed incomes. They can't handle another increase. That was what this was all about. But I guess we have to just simply receive it and leave it to the mayor. Whether or not the mayor and senior leadership team can come up with the savings to lower the budget. Using capping, using every tool that we have except for reserves. I don't support that.
I wish it was as clean as the old days where we would move a motion now and say, okay, this is your cap. Every department come in at 2.5%, come in at 3%. If you don't come in at 2.5 or 3%, then come in and explain why. That's what's done in every other government in the country. Can't speak to the other municipalities in Ontario because they've all been, many of them have been thrown topsy-turvy with this new process. We don't have that process anymore. So we've gone through this. We can now see what is required, but we can't direct staff to find the savings. Only the mayor can. And that's why I find it frustrating, and that's why, if it was disrespectful, it is the mayor's budget. It's not ours. And it's not the public's budget, because quite clearly, we're not receiving their comments authentically and taking them into consideration, because the vast majority around this table have heard from people that the taxes are too high. 28% over 4 years, 40% increase in water rates, $500 increase for rain tax on urban homes. These are significant increases for many people on a fixed income. So I hope the mayor will take this into consideration. Thank you.
I have Councillor Spadafora, followed by Councillor Beattie, then Councillor Jackson. Councillor Spadafora.
Thank you, Budget Chair. And I only have, seems like one question, but maybe there's a few questions in the one question. So this report was for staff to come back and tell us what it looks like at Councillor Clark's ask at 2.6. So my question is, besides what was brought forward, why do I not see savings savings that would be brought forward from efficiency? I see service level, potential service level cuts, deferrals of capital, all that stuff. We got, can't remember what the program's been called, it's been mentioned a bunch of time, Build Better. We've introduced technology. We've done all kinds of things. Like when you introduce technology, you would think that that should be able to reduce the manual work that's needed. So that would be an efficiency, a savings that can be then passed on to our residents. Hey, we're going to invest in this, and then we're going to save you money here, and here's the savings. So I'm struggling with the only thing that we came back with here are service level adjustments, which I'm assuming would be reductions, and then deferrals. What about efficiencies that we've been able to create through all the new programming and IT and technology and just merging of departments, finding redundant positions we don't need anymore? Where's all that work that staff should be doing to say, hey, we don't got to cut service levels. Here's the savings we've found. We are able to get the tax levy down, and we're not going to cut the service level. Why aren't we seeing any, like, why is that not coming forward as an option? Maybe it is, but in this report, I don't see it, unless, again, I miss, maybe Councillor Cassar will tell me where it is, but I don't see it in this report. So I'll ask staff or one of the councillors to help me.
I'll recognize GM Zagarek, please.
Through the chair, there are savings and efficiencies reflected in the figures that informed the report, approximately $19 million, and that formed part of the outlook presentation that represented the starting point for the inflationary report. Not to suggest that work has ceased. Staff are still continuing to pursue opportunities for further savings and efficiencies, but I do want to highlight there's $19 million already reflected in the report. Not all of these are savings. Some are adjustments with, I believe, $3 million, $3.4 million with the recycling program forms part of it, but there are savings reflected in the figures.
Thanks for that, GM. It's hard for me to say to someone we have a $2.5 billion budget and we found $19 million in savings and efficiencies, and one of them is a recycling program that has nothing to do with us. That efficiency and savings was due to a program change from the provincial government, not from anything staff did. So and again, I'm not disparaging staff. I'm just saying, $2.5 billion budget, $19 million savings. Out of the 19, $3 million was because the provincial government changed the program. We saved $3 million. So now we're down to $16 million on a $2.5 billion budget. It needs to be better. 16 million on $2.5 billion is, again, the math doesn't add up for me, but.
Councillor Beatty?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. We're collecting some feedback around the horseshoe apparently, so that's fine. I want to be very clear and concise and level-headed. When I say this with full respect, that this report, in my opinion, is closer to where we need to go. It's going to hurt, but I don't think status quo thinking is going to work here. And I'm going to put my oar in the water right now, and I'm going to say that I will look for and I will support efforts to bring us below the 6.6% projected preliminary, whatever number we want to call it, however we want to use the terminology here, fallback position. And it is preliminary and it is an outlook, but it's still, it's too darn much. And so I'm just flatly stating, respectfully, this report, I think, gives us an opening into how we can truly deliver on a reduction and better value for our taxpayers. And this is the direction that you'll see me heading, and I'm going to be consistent on that. So those are my comments.
Councillor Jackson?
Thanks, Budget Chair Maureen Wilson. I didn't want to leave Councillor Clark out there on his own, and I'm glad Councillor Taddison, reading his public comments, as if I can paraphrase, saying that this budget process is backwards and that we should be directing staff in terms of a budget number and let them come back with it. And I just want to say, Budget Chair Wilson, with what Councillor Clark said, and yes, you can call it from traditional times that I've been part of because I bridged the past to the current time I'm in, but I always found that that was a proper way, a prudent way on behalf of our everyday taxpayers to proceed, trying to provide a balance of trying to improve the quality of life for our residents, keeping in mind that we are not a wealthy municipality. Our affordability and ability to pay is not like neighbors to the east and west. And so we're in, once again, a dilemma. And on top of everything, it's been compounded by Ford's legislation of the super mayor powers, which I have so deeply resented that he ever implemented, that I will forever feel that it has taken away my democratic ability to provide serious, meaningful input every single year on the budget. And so I'm just saying right up front right now, thanks, Councillor Clark, for the refresher and reminder to everyone. And some way, somehow, last term of council, we averaged about 2.5% increase, got our community through the worst healthcare crisis in our generation, and still moved our community forward. And you know what? There wasn't any backlash by the overwhelming majority of our citizens, because they knew we were doing our best with the Balancing Act and also doing our best to ensure they could continue to afford their homes, their families, and carry on their normal lives. So I'm just very, very disappointed at this 8.9, 6.6. Councillor Clark tried with the 2.5. And we still have to, with my motion, Councillor Nan's motions coming up later, we have to forward them to Mayor Horvath, whereas in past terms, with the collective support of the majority of councils, we could direct staff, and staff would come back with that disciplined approach, knowing what council wanted on behalf of the majority of our citizens. Thanks, Budget Chair Wilson.
Councillor Critch, welcome back.
Thanks, my computer is indisposed at this time. I apologize for using the manual method, but I got you anyway. I do want to clarify a couple things here I think that are important as well. I do agree with people that, you know, we are doing things a bit of a different way. And I think everyone's providing feedback here about how they want to see this process work, right? So I think everyone's saying, look, this is how we want it to work. The mayor's probably listening to that feedback pretty intently. She can, through her directive, do exactly what you're asking for. So suggesting that that's not possible anymore, that can't happen anymore, isn't true. The mayor issues her directive and she puts words in the directive and they're real. And she can issue certain kinds of directives and certain kinds of language. She's working with staff to bring something forward. So that's part of the process. That just means that we don't get a vote on it. Oh well, The provincial government made that choice. We can continue to bemoan it year after year after year, but it's not going to change anything. So here we are. What we can do, and I agree, it is difficult for us as councillors to be sat here asked to be basically coming up with a financial exercise or financial tools or coming up with ways to reduce budgets. I think that everyone's coming here with different experience. Everyone's coming here with different ideas. No one came in here with an accounting background. That's not a prerequisite for the job. So to some extent, we have professionals who do this work every day. And we rely on them to do that work because they are qualified to do this work and they're professionals in their fields. As amateurs in that, we still have some responsibility as leaders at this table and as governors in the city to do our best too. So I encourage us to work with the professionals, with each other, bring motions to the table to see savings and reductions, and stop bemoaning something we have no control over and suggesting that somehow that's the fault of anyone here. I think we've heard it. I think we understand it. I think we all don't like the strong mayor powers and the decisions the province has made. In fact, there was a motion put forward recently, I believe, that went forward where we all agreed that we think it's a bunch of nonsense. So no one's disagreeing there. I think there's an opportunity having the September outlook and knowing that we have a little more time in the spring. We have an extra bit of time there. If you look at the legislation, to do the work we need to do. So I just encourage everyone to do it, right? And to come here with motions, not just say, I'm going to be angry about it, I'm going to be mad about it. Yeah, fine. But also bring forward a motion suggesting we do these reductions, work with our professional staff, they're available, and that's our job.
Thank you. We recognize Councillor Francis, and just reminding folks, we still have an afternoon standing committee. Thank you.
Totally agree that the fact that, Chair, that this is a flawed process. Some of the comments the previous speaker made, I agree with. It's a very flawed process. But we worked within that process. We brought motions forward. And they all, one after the other, failed last year. So let's not act like that work wasn't being attempted to be completed by this council. We tried to bring motions forward, and one after the other, they failed. Even motions telling staff, directing staff to come back and bring us, like to Councillor Clark's original point, what it would look like, a 2.5% budget. We tried this, and every single motion came in simple, even a simple motion, like $9,000 savings on a poet, didn't even pass. No one's willing to look at anything here, so let's not act like this is just squarely on the provincial government. This is, or our colleagues. We've been trying to do this work here, and it's been slammed down in our face every single time.
Councillor Nan, please.
Thank you. I'd like to call a question on receiving this report.
Second, the question is called and it's seconded. As chair, we'll do so now. It's been duly moved and seconded by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Beattie. Show of hands, yay or nay? I see a good majority, yep, so I'll take that as a yay. Thank you. Okay, folks, we're on to motions, I believe, of the agenda. And so if I could have a speakers list, if you have a motion. Okay, thank you. Councillor Nam, please.
Thank you, Budget Chair. I circulated the motion to my council colleagues, and it's just been minorly edited in order to be in compliance with the legislation for the budget process for council members to move motions within the mayor's directive power. So the motion reads that council requests that the mayor include in the 2026 budget directive to apply the 2025 surpluses, including 2025 works in progress savings, towards reducing the 2026 tax levy impact. And all my colleagues are clear based on the questions we've all been asking inside of the forecast, with great thanks to GM Zagaric in clarifying the responses. There is past practice of doing so, and so we just want to make sure that this strategy is used for 2026. Thank you. Oh, also one more thing, Chair, is that my seconder is Councillor Jackson, and this motion actually shows how we can take dialogue and feedback that's happening among council colleagues and use the system as imposed on us by the provincial government to have our residents' best interests at heart and impact the budget process going forward in the spirit of collaboration and taking ownership of the budget as still being a collective budget of this council, but doing so within the framework that we're limited by, which is just a different way. by which we can move these motions. It requires specific language that this council request our mayor to consider this. So I just wanted to use this also as a learning opportunity if any of my colleagues wanted to apply the same tactic going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion has been moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? Recognizing Councillor Critch.
My only quibble is that, from my perspective, I understand the works in progress history here and how WIP, as it's called, WIP lists have been used in the past. I'm asking staff to make sure that they can provide a track changes version or some inclusion understanding of how those savings are being done. So what I mean to say by that is, if you've got a WIP list and the list has got 15 projects on it, and you're coming forward and you say, I want to use this project here or that project here, can we do it in a way so we can just see the changes you're making, not just coming forward with the final product? I know this is a discussion we've had previously. I understand that there's a motion that was put forward and a report was supposed to be here. I'm not debating that point. I'm just asking more for a technical clarity here, that when it comes back, it's really clear what the original amount was and what the savings will be, so we can see that.
So if my understanding is, a WIP is a capital project that has been closed out, and then there might be some remaining, but I'll look to GM Zagaric.
Through the chair, what staff typically report on is, I'll use an example, if the project was budgeted at $1 million and at substantial completion projection is $900,000, there's $100,000, and then we apply this other filter as a contribution debt. Notwithstanding that, what we would then report is which capital projects came in under budget and the opportunity to appropriate the surplus. Our practice is not to apply that surplus towards a specific project. Our practice is to take those savings and to reduce our capital levy requirements for the upcoming year. So that is the level of reporting we can provide.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure it's really clear. What I'm also saying, though, I think sometimes what has happened in the past, in my own reading of public documents, I've seen it happen, where there's a project on the books to be done, and there's a decision not to do that project. Or we've completed a portion of the project and we're deciding, like there's some more fine nuance here. Yes, there's the things you're talking about in the list, but there's sometimes other things that are works in progress. And we say, okay, we're going to defer that or turn it into a multi-year budgeting. I'm just asking for all these things to be really clear. That's all, in a separate document where we can see, okay, we were going to do this for 2026. We were going to do a boulevard thing. And then we're trying to save tax money, so we're going to defer that boulevard thing to 2027. I just understand these things all to be sort of part of the same genus and species, however you want to understand that. So can we just make sure that if we're doing that, we're clear about where that is? That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Through the chair, we can take that interest away and see whether we can develop categories where it's a approved project that is substantially complete versus a project that's no longer necessary versus a project that's being deferred. So we can see if we can develop some categories and group projects within those categories to improve in terms of the ability to interpret what is changing.
Thank you so much. That's exactly what I'm looking for, is just a bit of a breakdown so that we're clear about projects that are already completed and projects that aren't. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, on the motion?
And just trying to understand the difference between this motion and the motion that we had about WIP earlier in the year. Didn't we already do that? Yours is not in order. It's a serious question.
Yeah. I don't have the original motion at hand, so it's difficult. Okay, thank you for that. Elsie McRae is going to dig into the tickle trunk and find the original motion so we can see any distinction or difference. And if I have to explain to you what the tickle trunk is.
Mr. Dressup.
Thank you.
Casey and Finnegan.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I remember these things.
I do too.
Yes, remember being crushed when I was 8. Mr.
Can I
Dressup
ask
was going
another
to be.
question
Yeah.
that is
Okay, you don't want to
ancillary
hear
to
my
this?
Mr. Dressup crushing story. Okay, please
Yeah,
proceed.
no, I'm 65. I have moments where I remember all those things. In the capital budget that we receive, where you have all the listings of the different projects, I have noticed changes in that capital budget from the capital budgets that were approved, and we were multi-year budgeting, from 2022, 2023, 2024. And money is bleeding from some wards and going into other wards. Do we get a justification as to why that is? Why would a project that was approved in the capital plan and made public then disappear in 2025 for the 2026 budget? It's just gone.
Through the chair, there may be content in the description of the capital detail sheet that speaks to reprioritization of projects. So where a project is being deferred and another project is being prioritized. We can take that message away as well as we look to prepare our detail sheets to see whether or not, if that is the case, if a project is being deferred, that again, we identify the rationale for the deferral, and if a project is being accelerated, the rationale for the acceleration.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I had 3 streets that were being urbanized in 2022, and now they're not going to be urbanized until 2028, 6 years. They were in the capital plan and now they're not. Anyways, just a good question. Let's understand that better.
Thank you. Staff are still conferring on your first question, Councillor Clark.
Chair, if I may, and with respect to Councillor Clark's question and reviewing the motion that's on the screen, the difference between the motion that I've moved and that is on the floor right now and on the table is that I'm seeking to apply the savings to our 2026 tax levy impact. Whereas the motion that was approved that Councillor Spatafora initially moved, that's before committee on the screen, is looking for information that could be considered. I think that's the fundamental difference, just to reply to the question that Councillor Clark asked in relation to the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nan. Councillor Clark?
In essence, Councillor Nan is taking the information from the motion that Councillor Spatafora has and then is now saying to staff, you have to find the savings accordingly. It just seems to be redundant to me, but I'll let it go.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on the speakers list on this motion? It's been duly moved and seconded. Okay. We're ready for the vote.
Can I just, I have a question.
Can we pause that?
I'm very
that
sorry.
action?
I'm very
No.
sorry.
Please,
But
Mayor.
this is, if I may, it's a point of guess of order maybe. Just in terms of, this has come up in the past when when I've declared an interest because I'm voting on something that tells me what to do. So it's kind of weird. And so I don't know whether that's appropriate to just declare a non-disqualifying interest to identify that I'm voting in favor of a motion that's telling me what to do. I don't know if there's anybody that can help me clarify that, but this happened recently, and I declared a non-disqualifying interest, and I don't know whether it's required or not. So if it's not required, I'm fine with it. If it is required, I'm just putting it out there. So we can just go ahead with the vote. I'm fine with that, but I'll have to ask what I'll do is I'll ask the Integrity Commissioner.
Yeah.
That's what I'll do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
so
you.
at this point, I'll just vote.
Thank you. And just for the members of the public, clerks are not allowed to advise members around matters of integrity or not, conflict or not. Thank you. Councillor Pauls, are you still with us? I'm not hearing your response. Thank you. That motion carries 13-0. Are there any additional motions to be heard today? I recognize Councillor Jackson. Never assume Councillor is chair. Just wanted to hear you.
Thank you, Budget Chair Maureen Wilson. So after back and forth with GM Zagaric, I'm going to play it safe. Wanted to avoid duplication, but I think this is the best prudent way to go to make it crystal clear. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 14 Councillor Mike Spadafora, that the mayor be requested to ask staff to report back during the 26 budget process about how many of the new FTEs, approximately 800, approved during this term of council have actually been hired to date. I think I've had enough. Yes,
Sorry,
Elsie McCray.
through the budget chair, you would just direct staff in this case, because you're just directing staff for a report back.
That's fabulous news, Elsie McCray, but I'm not here to compromise you at all. All I've heard all day is, Tom, you've got to request the mayor to do it. So this is wonderful news. If just for information's sake, I can direct staff. That's fantastic, Elsie McCray and Budget Chair Wilson.
I think the distinction might be, I don't want to speak for Elsie McCray, it's what is done with that information would be within the prerogative of the mayor's budget.
Nice to see the word staff be directed up there. Thank you, Elsie McCray, with all respect to our Mayor Horvath.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Are there any questions on that motion? Okay, so I don't see any questions. It's been duly moved and seconded. If we could have a vote, please, electronically. Thumbs up from Councillor Jackson and Kretsch and McMeekin. That carries 12-0. Are there any further motions for today? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thank you for the outlook and the work of staff. Appreciate your attention. Just a reminder, the Recreation Master Plan is to be deliberated at 1:30. Thank you very much.